Hey, what is up? Welcome to the docket. I am your host, Bob Mata. This is my much more beautiful, much smarter co-host, Allie, and we are here to just bring you just facts. What's up, girl?
Hey, babe. Hey, y'all.
How are you?
I'm pretty excited about our guests today.
We have amazing guests tonight. I'm super excited about them. And again, so Allison is still in the midst of drafting up a post-conviction relief act petition. As you guys know, she's the real worker in the house. She does the real work, all the lawyering still. So thank you for allowing me to tear you away from that, which has been
We needed a break at this point.
I agree. I mean, you have to step away from that just to like clear your mind. I mean, how many pages is he on with that thing roughly?
I don't know, 100 and something. I don't know.
It's like Susan's book. Susan wrote a novel, she wrote a book.
I hope it's not much longer than 100 pages, or you just insulted her.
It's definitely longer than 100 pages, and it's
you were insulting me. I get it now.
No, it's far more interesting. No, but thank you so much for joining us, babe. I appreciate it because I know that you are trying to get that thing wrapped up. So, all right, so super excited. We've got two amazing guests tonight, and I'm really excited to have both of them. So, Susan Hendricks, you know her, you love her. She's been knee deep in Delphi really since the story broke. In 2019, she decided to get really, really deep into it. And, she made her first trip out to Delphi. And, she was able to forge like a real relationship with the families of both Abby and Libby. And consequently, she ended up writing an amazing book, which we are going to be throwing in the links. If you guys have not read it, click on it. It'll bring you right to the Amazon link for it. It's an important book because you're really getting the family's side of what it's like to go through that kind of trauma, which is really unthinkable. It's an unimaginable type of trauma to kind of withstand. And, Kelsey, Libby's sister, Frank, and I didn't read it. I had done the Audible with it. And when I did Audible, it was Kelsey helps narrate it. So it's Susan and Kelsey both doing it. And it's really a moving book, and it's really, really well written. So I couldn't recommend it anymore. And it's called Down the Hill. I meant to have a graphic for it, but in lieu of that, just make sure you're clicking on the link, because Joel on Surviving the Survivor always puts the big graphic on it. But it's called Down the Hill: My Descent into the Double Murder of Delphi. It's an amazing book. And beyond her being an author, I mean, she hasn't done much in life. She's just an author, former anchor for Headline News, anchor for CNN. And now she has started her own YouTube channel, which we will also be throwing in the links. So we expect everybody in here tonight to be subbing over on their YouTube. They're just starting. I'm going to be extremely disappointed because I'm going to go check right after. I know what their sub count was before this show.
I'm not forcing anyone to do anything. So
I am.
I'm sure, but it'll speak for itself, and I'm sure that the people will follow without your, jokingly.
Yeah, I'm kidding, but it's brand new channel. They just dropped their second video today. The editing is next level. It's like watching court TV. It's like that type of editing. It's professionally done editing. They do a beautiful job with it. It's super tight. And they're going to be doing lives as well, but like kind of to roll it out, they've done a couple of videos. Obviously, both Susan and Dan are both heavy into Delphi. And Dan is an amazing guy that I actually got to know prior from Barb McDonald, because Dan was the producer of the Down the Hill podcast, which was also produced by Headline News. So both of these folks are very steeped in Delphi. They both know it in and out. It's been a part of their lives for years. And so Dan is a nice Polish kid from the city of Chicago. He's another long suffering Bears fan like myself. We both enjoy each other's misery after another Bears loss. We always text each other about, why do we do this to ourselves? And Dan's just an amazing guy. And he's been in the entertainment industry and the news industry on the back side of the camera. And now he's on the front side of it. So we get to see his beautiful, handsome face now from now on.
All right. So let's see it then.
All right. So let's bring him on. Susan, Dan, what's up, y'all?
That was the nicest thing
yes.
anyone's ever said about us.
Yeah.
We need to save that.
Oh, you guys are amazing. So we're super, super excited to have you both on. Thank you for joining us on a Friday night.
Thanks to both
Probably
of
have
you.
better stuff to do. But hopefully we'll make it entertaining, and hopefully we can kind of dive into some stuff. So why don't you guys first tell us about like what made you want to start the channel? Like what was the impetus of it?
Well, I'll start and then Dan, you could chime in. I swear this is not how it usually goes, but I'm just taking control here. So I would say, Dan, like 2 years ago, Dan's like, we should do something together. And I thought, oh, I want to. And HLN went away from live programming. I think it's been a year now.
Mhm.
And I kind of saw it coming, it as it was bought by who, Dan? It was Discovery.
Yep.
Yeah, Zaslav and all of that. And so we knew there was kind of whispers about, oh, they may get rid of this, they may get rid of that. And there's always anxiety, and being there for so long, Dan, you as well. You hear the rumors and you think, oh, it's not going to be us or art. And it was all of HLN. And Dan and I had discussed doing things together. We did an episode of Down the Hill together. And so we thought, okay, but I literally had no time. And with a young son at the time, my daughter, I was like, I'm too busy. But then it just felt right. And Dan is not only smart, but just intuitive. And I felt like it was a good fit for us, but we're in this together in terms of not knowing what we're doing. So I'm glad we're talking to you.
Hey, welcome to the club. So, I had been doing my podcast for a couple of years, and, I've got my producer, Darren Wood, and I had not done anything with YouTube. We had this channel, but we had not produced any real content for 2 years. And then finally, I think in September, maybe, we decided to start doing the lives. So we're just ahead of you. You guys will get the hang of it real quickly. And I'm serious. The production value is phenomenal. They look great. I've watched both videos, enjoyed them both, super informative. And just really, really well put together. So, for all our people out there, I highly recommend you guys check it out. And they're great. Like they each run around, like, I think they were both around in the, 25-minute range, kind of like in and out, you cover a bunch of stuff, both with a little bit of emphasis on the Delphi stuff, because obviously it's pressing, it's the case that never sleeps. It's every time I try to do something else, it like sucks me back in. So, and then Dan, in terms of talk about your career a little bit. I mean, we all know, because Susan's been out there in front of us all for years. What have you been doing?
Yeah, I've been the troll behind the mic for most of my career. Yeah, I started with public radio in Tampa, Florida, and eventually moved over to CNN. And then I spent time after my first stint at CNN at NPR and American Public Media. And then I came back to it was Turner then it turned into Warner Brothers, and it turned into Warner Brothers Discovery. And I worked there until last year, and actually got to know Susan while we were making Down the Hill, the podcast, and a little behind the scenes about that. We'd set up shop at CNN Center in Atlanta, and we took over this conference room for a year.
It was a whiteboard, a huge whiteboard.
That you could
have the whiteboard.
Yeah, it was a whiteboard wall, and we called it the War Room. And it was kind of like a clubhouse when you were a kid, like only certain people were admitted, right?
And there were code words, and meanwhile, no one even cared. They're like, "What?"
Yeah.
So you guys had it guarded better than Andy Baldwin guarded the crime scene photos.
Much.
Oh, come on! Don't go there. Don't. Things were going so smoothly.
Yeah, no, and Susan, Susan, she was usually busy doing television, but she was the TV owner of the story at HLN in a certain respect. And so I got to know her through that. And every time, we were doing all our galaxy braiding stuff, with the whiteboard, and I would always drag Susan, and Susan, what do you think of this? Susan, what do you think of that? Like, let's chop it up. And, we really I got to know her that way. And, I think that's sort of where our friendship struck up.
And the CNN lawyers would come in and say, don't hypothesize, don't even guess who did, like, don't try to solve this or
Right.
even think about who may have done it. And they
Right.
leave and were like, holy shit, what do you think about the Mears farm and this and that? I digress. Take away but
We
that's
thought about it. It didn't hit the air.
right.
Yeah.
But and then, right. So it was this room and Drew, and it was just a fun room because everyone of course, was really focused on this, and we knew what we could and couldn't do. But the
Yeah.
people that surround you matter so much.
Yeah,
You know?
and one person was especially not allowed in, and that was Mike Lanos, former anchor of HLN, he always used to pop his head in like, "What's going on in Delphi?" You're like, out now.
Yeah, I mean, the sense of humor at CNN HLN was beyond what you guys. I think you need that in any profession.
For
But
sure.
it was there. And even
sure.
when I first got home, this sounds in bad taste, but it's not. I say home, but back to Atlanta, my first trip there, and I interviewed Tobe Lesenby, and we did a special, Mike Alanos and I, and he's like, well, do you want me to be part of the special? I'm like, you have to be. Like, he's just that good. And so he would see me down the hall and say, Tobe, hey, Tobe, what's going on? He called me Tobe for 3 years, as in Tobe Lesenby. That's a sense of humor. I'm like, what?
Yeah. You really do need it, though, especially when we're dealing with such
You
dark
need it.
topics. You know what I mean? It's like, and Alice and I, from the law side of it, same deal. I mean, there's got to be some levity, otherwise, you'll drive yourself nuts.
My dad is an attorney in New Jersey. It's Hendricks and Hendricks, my dad and Uncle Peter. And I would come back from college and meet them for lunch, and they would crack each other up. They're 10 years apart, my Uncle Peter being younger. But the hysterics, and I'm thinking, haven't you guys told each other these jokes? Like, but I think
Hundreds of times.
I think you need that levity, that kind of feeling, no matter what
You
it is
do.
you're doing, but especially, you're right.
And the deeper
Not
you get
humor,
into it,
Right. Go ahead, Dan.
yeah, the deeper you get into it,
Yeah.
almost the darker the humor gets. It's almost like a sliding scale. It's just how you cope, when you get into.
Yeah, it's a coping thing. Exactly.
Totally. It really is. It really is. And, so obviously most of my viewers, because I've been heavy into the Delphi, and, I'm close. I'm in, I'm in the burbs of Chicago. And
How far are you from
it's
Delphi?
like 2.5 hours. Like, so
Okay.
for me, it's
That's
a
it. It only took you 2.5 hours to get to the courthouse?
Yeah. Yeah. Cause
Ooh.
it's right past, Lafayette. So it's like, like the toughest part is 94 getting through, like, right when you get into Indiana, like,
Yeah,
Columbus.
I live in Chicago, so I've made
Yeah,
that. I know.
Were you born and raised in Indiana, or?
No, I was born and raised in Chicago. So I grew up in
Oh,
Oak Park, which is the first suburb.
that's the friendship then.
Yeah, that's where it is. So yeah, I'm not an Indiana guy, but
Okay.
I've been going there my whole life.
Okay.
And obviously it's close to home. And like I kind of stayed out of the case in terms of, like, first of all, when it happened, I was still strictly lawyering, and by the time I decided to start the podcast and I was kind of looking into true crime beyond like what I had done with the Gacy thing, and I was deciding I was going to do the docket where I was covering kind of current cases. I'm not big on speculating, and it's like, and Susan and Dan, you guys know more than anybody. In that 5 years that the case was cold, like the online community had just gone off the rails with speculation. Everybody was trying to solve it. We had all the armchair sleuths.
Madness.
Yeah, it was madness. And it was like, we saw the same thing with the Idaho 4 case prior to Koberger getting arrested. And it was like, that was even more upsetting to me in terms of what people were doing, in terms of accusing people online. It was like,
Yeah.
Real lives were getting ruined.
Remember that with
like,
Kaylee's
literally.
boyfriend? Is it him? Is it not?
It was unbelievable. The guy at the, at the food truck,
Yes,
the hoodie
yes.
guy, they had him leaving, leaving town, going to his parents' house at 5 in the
Say,
morning.
I was even listening to the audio of what the guys were following them said, because you think 4 college kids, how could this happen?
Right.
Right. So everyone was so in it. And I think maybe the intention there was good, but it got out of control, as you
It
said.
did. It spawned, and it was feeding itself in terms of like the creator world, and I didn't really, Darren and I didn't touch it until the arrest, because I just wouldn't get involved with that, because of like when I'm seeing professors getting like accused on TikTok and then turning around and so I did like kind of like a call to arms and did like a soapbox thing that, we as creators, we have a responsibility
Well, that's
to act
true.
responsibly about this type of thing. And it's fine, it's one thing to have opinions, and as long as you're going to pose it as merely an opinion. And it's always very important, as you guys know, when the lawyers just poke their head in, it's always alleged. We weren't there. We don't know. So it's like, as much as we think that we're solving or cracking cases, much like law enforcement, who actually has access to the evidence, they're not always right, and they're still just going on theories. And it's the same thing with, and that's not to say that I don't think that the online community does amazing things, because they do.
They do.
But
Some of the people that I've run into are like online, the research they do is like unparalleled.
to me, and as you're talking here, and I feel like that's why I decided to write the book. I wanted to write the book from the perspective of the families, because once I was there and once I got to know Mike and Becky, especially, Dan, I remember us in Delphi eating at a Panera together. But once you're let in, then you feel like you're on the opposite side of the camera.
Yeah.
So not to be on a high horse, but it changed completely. I
Totally.
remember one of my early assignments as a reporter. I was in Palm Springs, 22 years old. They're like, there's been there was a major plane crash. Well, there's the pilot's home. He lives in Rancho Mirage. You stake out that home and try to get the crying wife.
Yeah.
That's what they assign me to. And they'll say, well, why didn't she cry enough? Why didn't you get her to cry more? That's what it is. And so you're on it and you're live from 5, 6, 7. Well, this case was different to me because of how kind they were, because of how open they were, and because of how different this case, for whatever reason, and a whole plethora of reasons. So I just think it changed me in a lot of ways, and it made me see things different. So when you're explaining that, the Koberger thing, I get it. But people tend to forget, or maybe they don't, because they don't know the family members. And I understand that, because you're on this certain level. You're on this plane of like, who is it? And let's zoom in. And I was there looking, could it be the guy at the food truck, and what's going on? So I understand that. But when you lose sight of that, and the families who are like, oh my gosh, what's going on. So it's
That was a brand new
world.
experience for me. When we started the podcast, I was working with a larger part of the company at Turner, who was sort of going from brand to brand, working with the brands who wanted to make podcasts. So I worked on the Impractical Jokers podcast for True TV and something for Bleacher Report. And I was happy to come home to CNN, which is my original home there, when HLN approached us and said, we'd like to make a podcast. And, we talked about the stories and, potentials. And then when Delphi was mentioned, I'm like, oh yeah, that one. Because just the cliff notes of it, which is all I really knew at the time, were super compelling. It was almost, on the surface, from a storytelling perspective, when you kind of scope out, it's like, this is almost like a real life ghost story in a way, right?
With Libby's recording, right?
Yeah. What I didn't know going into making this podcast, or didn't think about until I really started getting into it, was how little was known about the actual crime at the time, because we started working on that in 2019. So we didn't know anything about the crime scene. We didn't know anything about public suspects, aside from people who had already been cleared. And so, how do we do a podcast without some of that core key information?
Background. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that was a bit of a challenge. So we just flew to Delphi and, and decided, all right, well, let's get to know the people who are involved in this story.
And they were so open and kind to it.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's how I got to know the families, or you talk to the,
I'm sure
not
that
just
they wanted somebody to shed some light on it. They felt like it wasn't getting solved and people didn't know about it. So
Yeah.
I can imagine them being very open from that perspective.
And so
And guarded too, Dan, don't you, wouldn't you say?
I think so at first, because, think about what they went through when the families and the town itself went through when this story first broke. Everybody from everywhere, if you haven't been to Delphi, downtown Delphi is 2 blocks, right?
Yep.
And it's a very small town. You always hear the cliche in podcasts and documentaries, this doesn't happen here. It doesn't happen there, right? And they were not prepared for it. The infrastructure just wasn't there. So all
Right.
these, the entire national media showed up. Many who were acting like, as Susan mentioned, sticking mics in people's faces, not very, they just want the shot. They want to
Right.
get their cut for the news that night, right?
And I feel like they trickled in, Dan, don't you think? Because when I first went there, no one was really there.
Yeah.
So it was before, I think the change of direction press conference changed everything. But before then, when I was there with Barbara, we went to the bridge, it was February 2019. So before the April press conference. And I remember just warm. Becky and Mike were just
Yeah.
warm from day one, of course. And this is no judgment on any family, but there's different ways people handle tragedy. And I remember with Diane, this was at New Orleans Crime Con. This is Abby's grandmother said to me that how different, you're thrust into this. All of a sudden you're in it. All of a sudden Kelsey is an advocate for her sister. All of a sudden she drops her off, small town, and never sees her again. Not to mention how she feels on the inside, but
Right.
all of a sudden she's there. And so Diane said to me, look, Susan, and I remember watching Mike's press conference. This is before I met him in March of 2019. So right after it happened, February it happened, March, he was speaking and he said, I'd like to speak for Abby's family, please. And he read a letter from them and he said, we respect Libby's family for wanting to speak out. Please respect ours. So, and Mike said, please, media, just talk to me. He was always kind of, in my mind, the leader, the doer, the come talk to me. And Abby's family was more of that. They didn't necessarily want to do that. And then speaking to Diane, Abby's grandmother on stage at CrimeCon, just learning so much. And she said, look, my only daughter, Abby's mom, she said, that's her only daughter. Imagine how I feel. It's devastating from all sides, but it's the first time I did normal things with the family, if you will, like eating mozzarella sticks with Mike. I remember being at CrimeCon and I said, should I be here? This is a meet and greet, Mike. This is weird. And he's so funny, speaking of humor. And he's like, have a Corona and just sit here. I went, all right. And these women come up and they're crying, mostly women, men too, but we've been like crying and really like so supportive. And Michael say, do you have a lime? But not that he wasn't. He was just, I think that when you're in a situation, and I'm so lucky that I got to see this perspective of something you never see, of you have to keep living. You have to you're allowed to joke. You're allowed to live. And that's what Kelsey had a problem with along the way, saying, I feel guilty. I'm engaged. I graduated. Libby should be going through these milestones.
Yeah.
Why am I the only one who's doing this? But you have to keep living. You have to joke. I found that interviewing Gabby Petito's dad, Joe Petito. It was very funny too. You have to, he said, if I wasn't funny, I don't know what I would do. Meaning or couldn't use jokes, meaning think of the human condition.
Yeah.
You kind of shy away. If someone loses a loved one, you don't know what to say. So you say nothing and you run.
Yeah.
Well, when you don't run, I saw that. I do want to bring this up because I told it to Kevin Balf from CrimeCon and I said, it was so weird seeing this because I got it, but I was on the side. So I'm with Mike and Becky and it was at CrimeCon in New Orleans, and we're all at the bar restaurant. And I see Joey Jackson, Mike Alanos, everyone at HLN. And I say, hey guys, this is the family. And they go, hey, circle around. They're out of there. Not to be disrespectful. They said, nice to meet you. No one knows what to say.
Right.
So the actual hanging out with the families, like, ugh, okay, bye.
In our industry, and that was new for me too. Like you go and cover the tragedy, you go and cover the murder, then you leave, right? And you leave these people and these situations behind, and you move on to the next thing.
And the next thing, and the
next thing. And this is the first time I think you too, Susan, have really stayed for so long inside of one particular story. And to me, one of the most surprising things was you spend so much time in a story about death, it becomes a story about life, and you know, and how it does go on, and that's sort of, you know, but and it's easy to cling on to that too, because right now what we're talking about is, you know, what's going to happen in the court, what's going to happen with Richard Allen, what's going to happen, you know, with this, you know, is there enough to convict him, is, you know, all that
But
stuff.
when they walk by Libby's bedroom, she's not there. So
Right.
that's it. That's the reality of their
And they're all
everyday.
perfectly valid conversations to have. That's where that's the part of where we are is right now.
Right.
And you know, we should be talking about it. But yeah, like, you know, Susan and I don't, you know, I know we're kind of taking this entire conversation into sort of a sad place, but like one thing that Susan and I were talking yesterday, and she had told me that on another show, she looked at her pictures from what, you know, she looked at her phone and wanted to see what was happening on her phone on, you know, February 13th, 2017. And I'd never done that before. I never thought about that. And, you know, Susan was making cupcakes with
My daughter, who has like teeth that are missing, and now she's 14 and doesn't want anything to do with me. But back then it was like her and my husband making cupcakes. And I looked back. Oh, it was Cheryl McCullum. I don't know, Bob
Man.
or Allison, if you've met Cheryl.
Oh yeah.
Amazing.
Love
So
that.
Zone 7 podcast. And I remember, so it was during when I was writing the book, I thought, I'm going to look back. What was I doing on the 13th of, you think 2017? And it was Emery and my husband, Joe, and that smiles. And I was like, oh.
For me, it was our dog asleep on a couch, which is 98% of the pictures on my phone anyway. 99. But yeah, and I looked at the time.
I mean, that really does put things into, like, it makes it hit home. You know?
Yeah.
Like that day, like
Yeah.
if you guys look at your pictures from 2017, February 13th, 14th, like you might be with your kids and how little they look and like, and how much they've grown. And then, you know, I never wanted this to be about me. I thought it would bring a perspective. Because at first I remember saying to Hachette, the public, I swear, 2020, a Zoom, when they're talking about the book deal, it was with a literary agent who I got through my friend, Nicole Lappin, who wrote Rich Bitch. Shout out to Nicole. Can I say bitch?
Of course.
I can. We're not at CNN.
We swear like truck drivers are.
And Hachette. And I just said, I just, in terms of what we make, like how are we going to divvy this up with the foundations and and it's crickets. And then he called me, you can't say that. This is, but I didn't want this to be about, I don't know. I felt I wanted the story to be out there, to be told.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that it is being told, but it was difficult for me, the process, but I'm so glad that I did it because I feel like I got to know Abby and Libby through what I saw, and I wanted the reader or the public to see that as well, in terms of just being on that billboard, like we saw with Lacey Peterson, you name it, Gabby Petito. It's just that one shot. And Joe Petito said to me, she could be feisty at times. Like you never talk about that. You just see the one shot, the one picture, and then that's it.
Yeah.
So
And I mean, like, kind of move. Go ahead. No.
You guys are in unison.
Go ahead, babe.
I was going to change the topic altogether because I want to know how much they're covering of this now and if they're continuing to cover it and
Who, us?
Us?
Yes.
Oh, we're all over it. Yeah. No, this is Susan and I. We have never stopped talking about
ever
these murders.
That's our lives.
Yeah. And I'm sure Susan and I have the same conversations that you do, you being anybody watching this, right? And running through scenarios. Like the thing that constantly, look, seeing is believing, right? And what everyone sees here is different because all the information is incomplete. So what everyone believes is different. And I am the biggest theorizer, I think, on Earth. I drive Susan crazy sometimes, but I'll be the first to admit any theory that I put together, any piece, I love trying to put not love, but I can't help but try to put the puzzle together. And I'm fundamentally flawed in doing that from the jump because I don't have all the pieces, but that doesn't stop me or anyone else from trying to do it.
That's human. But I remember being on Surviving the Survivor with Bob, and some of the comments, someone said something really mean, and I know you're not supposed to read the mean stuff and just say, but it was like, well, Susan, you of all people should da. And I said, well, and this is the truth. I didn't feel like it was my place to try to solve it.
Right.
So, oh, you should be of all people one to not say this, this, and this. And that's what I take through the book. And it was literally my experience and their experience. And I
Yeah.
understood where they came from. Delphi, less than 3,000 people, what they were equipped for, what they weren't. Tobe Lesenby, one of the nicest people I've met, the sheriff at the time, trying his best. I would call him early on. The further on we got, the less he would answer my calls because of the influx of media. But I would say, hey, there's this guy, they're thinking about him, and da 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 is his name, and he has a tattoo. It looks like Libby, what they're saying. And he's like, we're looking into him. Well, then that became the headline, as you know. Like, oh, this could be it. This could be it. It was my husband's birthday. We were in Miami, and I remember getting a call. Inside Edition wants you on now. You can go to the local news, Fox in Miami. Hurry up, get there. I was like, okay, because I met Inside Edition. When you're there, you're with certain media. And the
Mhm.
nicest guy, the reporter there, was like, we got close being live, and you're very close to each other. So I said I'll go live. I don't mind. But I texted Tobe, and he's like, no. Like, meaning not no, it's not him, but not no, like, we're not saying anything. It was just very much closed off. So that's when they finally made an arrest with Richard Allen. I took it obviously seriously because it was someone who was finally charged, because the, throughout there were roller coasters. And Mike did bring up to me, which I think is key in pointing out. He said, Susan, early on, I was on the roller coaster of, oh my gosh, I think they got this guy, because it was a guy who was arrested and he had a hatchet on I think a bridge, Dan, in Colorado. Was it
Oh,
Nathan?
Daniel Nations.
Yeah, Nation. And he's like, and I really thought we had him. And he goes, and then the letdown was so heavy that he's like, I don't care what. I could see Mike saying this, and he said it a bunch of times. I need to hear we made an arrest. He goes, I don't care. Oh, this guy looks like this guy, and that guy looks, because he'd been down that road.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I like what's interesting about the book is that you're going from kind of pure journalism into more of almost a documentarian, but not quite, because you're actually building a relationship with the family. You know what I mean? So it's
With
like,
no pretense. It was kind of
right,
just like,
exactly. It was a completely organic thing, and it's like, and it was such a unique view,
mhm.
and then it was, and like you said, and I like to think that we're Midwestern folk, and Midwestern folk we're nice typically,
Northeast New Jersey, my
Yeah,
reputation
and
not so nice. I'm like Vinny. Oh,
yeah,
Vinny, who I
Allie's
know
from
you
Philly, so I know.
Vinny, who
Well,
I know you know well.
I lived in Jersey for a while too.
Oh,
So,
where?
well,
What exit?
I South Jersey. So I was in Ventnor.
Oh, yeah. So Vinny at Court TV, his father was a judge, and my dad had been an attorney in front of his dad. So it's a small world
World.
in New Jersey, but it's funny. It's like we're not known to be that nice, but we are.
Yeah,
Well,
Philly
I'm way
folks, not
south,
nice.
but next to near Atlantic City, and
Oh,
assuming
yeah, yeah.
you were more north.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so for me, when I kind of decided to really kind of dig in, and it was post arrest, and that was my thing. And
Okay.
I obviously knew the background. I knew, and like Dan was saying, I mean, the one thing that you knew about this case, it was very close to the vest as far as law enforcement with respect to what
Unusually so.
very, very unusually so. And it was, I mean, we got what they wanted us to see, and that was it. I mean, which was essentially, we got the short clip, the picture, and a little bit of sound,
And
and
Bob, I think my opinion, especially with writing the book and re-listening to every press conference and everything that I listened to and over and over again, I truly believe, and it's logical. I truly believe that they thought that the person, because Libby recorded on her phone, they were counting on, banking on a
right,
family member of the bridge guy coming forward and saying,
right,
"That's my cousin Steve," or
right.
"That's Jim, that's my dad, that's my stepdad, that's my uncle." And that never came.
I
So I
know.
felt like that was their go-to.
I would have been
Does that
thinking the
not make
exact
you
same
think
thing.
that Did they
you
start to
know?
think maybe it was someone not local since nobody recognized the person?
Well, and that's a great question because that's what I thought out of the gate. I mean, I really did. And then I went there and I walked to the bridge, and that will be forever etched in my mind. I remember Kelsey saying, I want to go with them. And Mike said, are you okay? She said, I'm okay. And she walked with us. And I'll never forget this. It was her and I. It was 90. It was freezing for me. And we would joke about Atlanta. And I had, because Barbara's like, you got to have warmers in your hands. So anyway, we're walking towards there, and the photojournalists from CNN are like, hey, we just had a meeting. We can't get arrested. We're going to hang back. And I thought, I'm just going to walk a little bit. It's fine. It's trails. And Kelsey was with Barbara, and everyone was hanging back. And I thought, I'll just, and then I heard my mom's voice. Don't be alone. You're going to be like, she's always worried, but it was, and I thought, this is a little creepy. I understand because
Yeah.
you think middle of the day. I
Yeah.
lived in California for a short time. This isn't Runyon Canyon. I mean, this is it's isolating the trip,
It
or
is.
maybe because I knew what had happened. So maybe
That's what it is.
if I didn't, because I used to go in the woods behind my house, that would feel isolating to anyone. To us, it was freedom.
Let me tell you
So
my bridge story. Oh, go ahead, Susan. Go finish yours.
I went back. We all went together, and then there it is. And it's not the bridge that has been now refurbished. It was like, oh
The
my
OG
gosh.
bridge.
15 minutes to get there, about 10-minute meeting. It was, and 13, 14, I would have been right on the bridge with Abby and Libby, right there, no fear, all's well. That's where I grew up, whatever. We had pipes in my backyard. But to see it, I thought, no way is someone from out of town. And me saying this means nothing, but Paul Holes, when he visited, he went, oh, there's no, and even local law enforcement, everyone, Detective Holman, the guy knows the area. If you're walking on the bridge like that, you know how to get there. It's hidden beyond belief.
And beyond that, it's it's an old railroad trestle, and at that point it was in complete disrepair. We're talking like there were entire ties that were missing. So it's scary.
It was petrifying. But
Yeah.
again,
It's a what?
14,
feet
13,
above
14.
the river. Yeah, it's
And Lionel, I remember. Do you know Lionel, Dan? Photojournalist?
No. Oh, yes.
You
Yes.
might.
Mhm.
He's like, Susan,
Chicago. Yeah.
we'll fake it, walk like a step or two. I couldn't. And I've always been scared of heights, but I mean, frightening.
it
Really.
really is.
And
I mean, even the pictures look scary.
I'm shocked that no one had fallen through that. And maybe obviously
I thought I was
locals
going to be the first, honestly.
no
Yeah.
locals know more than we do. So, but Paul, I remember telling me, he said, I'm scared of heights too. He said, I took 10 feet. I went 10 feet. I'm like, I'm not even taking a step. So once I saw that, I was like, okay, I get why there's no way he's from out a trucker. Cause there were, people are trying to speculate in a way of like, who did this? Who could it have been? There's no way it was someone passing through that's going to walk 15 minutes and find these girls.
No
So
way.
it was
Right.
clear to
I
me.
mean, there is a difference between someone passing through and then someone who's perfectly familiar with it from a neighboring town, from a family member. I don't know. It
There's
just
no fear as an adult. None looking down. It's, if you see that video,
Yeah.
my mom even said, oh, the video of him walk, it looks like a stroll. It looks like it could be like, I don't know, 5 feet up.
Right.
For it to be that high, he knew what he was doing. He knew where he was going.
Yeah, and frankly, yeah, you have to know the area to
Get to it.
at both ends of the
Get to
crime,
Right.
right?
To get
Yeah,
to the bridge.
to leave the crime scene where the bodies were left as well. You need to know how to get out of there, and how to get back to,
And when you get out on that bridge and
Uh,
you realize immediately in terms of the condition of the high bridge itself that you cannot walk across it without looking down.
no.
You know what I'm saying? Like, which goes to,
If
you know,
anyone can, teenagers, I'm thinking like
maybe
Abby or Libby, maybe, but not Richard Allen. I felt like he was, well, innocent until proven guilty. I take that back. Whoever was on the bridge, they were looking down, right?
they had to be.
The video, you have to be.
You have to be. It's like there's too many ties, like railroad ties missing. Like there's huge, like it's not like if people have never been on a trestle, like I always tell the story, when we were in high school in Oak Park, Like we'd all like on Fridays, there was a liquor store that used to sell pony kegs to the high schoolers. It was called Mario's Liquors
Does
on North.
everybody have that?
Shut up, Mario's.
Yeah,
We had a Hungarian bar in New Jersey that sold us a
Yeah.
case of Coors Light and cheerleading.
exactly. So we'd get the kegger, and there was a forest preserve right off of North Avenue and Thatcher, which is a street right in River Forest. And we would bring the kegger out, and pretty much I'd say a majority of the junior and senior class would go out there on Friday afternoons, and we'd drink until the Forest Preserve police would crash it, and then we'd all run. But there was a trestle, and it went over, Dan, it went over the Des Plaines River over there. And it was probably only, I'd say 25 feet. Now, when you're talking about the High Bridge, we're talking 100 plus feet.
68, yeah.
Yeah.
63.
And it's
Yeah.
not a short bridge either. You know, where
No,
the
it's
bridge
not.
guy caught up with Abby and Libby, there was a long way between where that bridge starts over that chasm
Yes.
and where they encountered each other. That's a long way to go.
It really is. And like in that trestle, like one of my friends fell in between the ties.
No.
And this was not in disrepair.
Mhm.
Like, so these were like your typical, probably 8 to 9 inches apart. And this dude fell through them. Now he was a very thin guy, but he fell through clean and went into the Des Plaines River, didn't break it. It was like miraculous. He wasn't like uninjured.
Wait, he went through? He didn't get caught?
He didn't, like, that's what I mean. He went through clean. It was, I don't even know how it happened. It seemed, you'd think that your elbows, like,
And
would
I bet
catch
in high
yourself.
school, everyone was laughing. Like,
Oh,
no,
of course. Well, when we all found out that he was not dead, yeah, we all started laughing. At first, everyone was like, "Oh my god!" And then when you get down there and he's fine,
He probably got a disease from falling in the Des Plaines River afterwards.
oh,
Right.
God, that's for certain. So, but like the point being,
Yeah.
it's the type of situation where anybody who's like, because when you talk about the witnesses in the PCA and you're wondering why all the girls gave a different description of the person they saw in terms of everything, clothes, what they're wearing, what they look like, the height, it's because number one, eyewitnesses are just
Well, why don't we see what she thinks it's the because is? Because I'm interested to know that.
I have an idea. Well, Becky brought up something to me, and I think that it fits. She said, Susan, depending on how old or young you are, you're going to describe someone as older or younger. Remember when you were young, you thought 30 was ancient?
yes,
And it is, I mean, ancient.
100%.
So depending on the older or younger, and Mike even said once, you know, think about the last time you filled up your gas tank. Describe one person there, one person,
no
and
one.
how important it was. Like, so it's difficult no matter what. But I know it's different when you're on a trail. Okay, you see people, but you're young, and depending on your age, I just feel like you're right. As you said, it's very difficult in terms of reliability, but I think the age matters significantly in terms of how
100%.
you describe them.
Perception. Yeah, definitely. Because like in it, like that's like, I'm always talking about how really eyewitnesses are so unreliable most of the time, because in a situation like this, the girls had no idea that they had to commit anybody to memory.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like
Ever, right? Ever.
Hey, when I was 15, 16 years old, I thought that anybody over 20 was basically 50, right?
Ancient.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like my
Well, then,
11-year-old
now
thinks
that
it's
being said, have you guys maintained a sense of like feeling like they have got the right guy, or that the investigation is or isn't over? Like, what are your thoughts?
I always go back to Superintendent Doug Carter, who always says and maintained, and I just feel like I respect him so much. I have a soft spot for him, and I remember I interviewed him the day of the arrest. It was Halloween 2022. But he always said, and think about how many interviews he had to do. He said, I can't tell you what I think. I have to tell you what I know, because we all want to say what we think. So what was on my mind at the time, well, really, I had a different perspective because I was with the families. But of course, I'm thinking, who was it? Could it have been this guy? Could it have been that? Who are the families around that? What's going on? I was in the war room with Dan. I understood that aspect of it, but I thought, we're not going to get this. You know, but I'd have my dad and Uncle Peter call me. What do you mean they can't get the guy? There's a video of him. He's walking. get the jacket, get the shoes. I'm like, Dad, everyone in the town has the jacket.
Right.
Everyone in Delphi has the jacket.
Right.
There is no
Carhartt.
easy answer for some reason. And I thought to myself, would I know if that was my dad walking? Would I know if it was my husband? Maybe. I don't know. So that's what they were really honing in on. But for me, it was, oh my gosh, who is this? And me staying at a hotel in Lafayette. Is it Lafayette or Lafayette?
Lafayette.
Lafayette, yeah. Either one.
Right.
One's right, one's wrong.
Shout out Marriott Courtyard.
I was petrified. I put a pillow over my head. I had nightmares. I mean, I was petrified, but I thought, I listened to what the FBI said early on. I believe it was Massa who said, that because it was clear that they were from there to the FBI and to local law enforcement. How do you get here without knowing it? But I think everyone was perplexed. Is this the guy who was he a genius? Did he just get lucky? Whoever it was, we don't know.
I was at the Richard Allen arrest press conference, and when this name first came out, everyone said, "Who?
Mm-hmm.
Who's that?" Because many of us had other names in our heads, based on different sorts of information.
Don't
And
name the names.
of course not. Of course not. I learned. But and then the PC came out in November, and I've said this on our show on Headline Crime.
Episode 2.
We're episode 2. Listen, subscribe, like. Thank you.
All that stuff.
Yeah. I hope the prosecution, if Richard Allen did indeed do this, I hope the prosecution has more than that's in that PC. Will I be surprised if he was the one who did this? No. Would I be surprised if, to me, there is not the compelling evidence that you want to see. Like, you would put that next to the Brian Koberger PC, right?
Right.
Which much different style of PC and much different strategy behind it. And, so like, I want to see more, because in this country, we're supposed to, believe that someone is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And I think at this point, maybe he did do it, but like, where's the, I want to see some more evidence beyond circumstantial that's in that PC. And maybe it's there, like Bob, Allison, you could tell us more than we could tell you about how much is held back from a PC and public knowledge. But, based on what's out there publicly.
Yeah.
It doesn't, it doesn't leave a lot. It's much less than we are used to seeing too.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have a sense of, like, if the family is going to be surprised if it ends up it wasn't him? Or
well, I will say this. I remember when Dan texted me. He was the one who told me I'm driving, and he texted me. He said, someone in custody, Richard, and he sent me the mugshot within minutes. He's a wife, married. I was like, what the F? Like, what? And I was in shock almost. And then I got home and I called Becky, and she was at a wedding, her nephew's wedding. And she said, I'll call you right back. And she's in the hallway, and I said, I don't want to ruin the wedding. And she said, no, it's what everyone's talking about anyway. Oh my gosh, Tara remembers him from CBS. We were getting Libby's picture developed for for the funeral. And she was crying, and he said, it's on me. She remembers him. Because I even know in Atlanta, it's a big city. I know who my CVS guy is, or like FedEx.
Sure.
I'm always FedExing stuff. The face kind of like, oh yeah. So who knew, right? But all along, and right before, I was with Paul Holes at and the family, and Tara, Becky, Mike on stage in Las Vegas at CrimeCon, and I remember saying, what happens when someone is arrested? But I did mention, and Paul spoke to this, and it's funny. I said to Mike, I know this is your panel, and he didn't know Paul Holes. And I just said, you got to meet him. He's a really nice guy. He's not like a slick detective type. He's really, and Mike's like, you're right. Because Mike's like this, it was his stage, Mike's stage. And I said, can Paul be on it? And he's like, absolutely. So he's on it, and he's talking about the sketch. And he said to me, and just Paul, I feel like, has that knowledge. Reading his book, oh my gosh, I recommend it to anyone who's listening. or was watching. It's amazing. And it's just his experience. I feel like he's that whisperer of knowing. An example, real quickly here, in his book, he looks at a crime scene, he sees dead bodies, no one else knows this. He says, based on what he sees, swab the guy's bottom of the foot, of her foot, sorry. And that's where the DNA was. And he could base it on the furniture, what's knocked over. So I think with his experience, he sees things that none of us see. And I wanted his opinion on the sketches, and he said, look, it's a ruse. It was a ruse to see what can we rattle? Who can we rattle? What can we do to, like, I don't know, move this investigation forward? And he said, and in his opinion, nothing happened. So to him, it was like, I don't know. But I saw Mike and Tara look at him, and because he has such an authority on it, because of his experience, I felt they had some hope there with Paul. And Paul did say to me, you know what, Susan, when I went there, when I first assessed the crime, he said, I hadn't been there. I thought, if there's homes around, why would he do that? He goes, I went there and I went, I get it. Down the hill, away from everything else. Down the hill, I get it. And so you feel like someone with that experience and that knowledge, which is rare, I listen to every word that he says. And so we'll see.
Yeah. And my, and to Dan's point, when it came out, and Allison and I have been reading PCAs for a long time, and my initial instinct was, first of all, why did Fran Gull seal it? Because there was nothing in that document that required it to be sealed.
Did she seal it, or the prosecutor?
No,
or
no,
up to the judge?
right?
No, it was Gull. Like, the prosecutors didn't get to seal anything. It was Gull, and because Diener had already passed the case off. He had already accused himself. So, I'm looking through it because it's always, we always redact witnesses' names, and like, that's commonplace. It's always done. Like, so they could have done that from the beginning. So when we're all kind of chomping at the bit, like, why won't they release it? What's going on? There must be some incredible stuff in here. It builds this kind of anticipation to where you're like, oh man, they got him. Like, I can't wait to read it. And then you read it, and as an attorney, a criminal defense attorney, I'm like, where is the evidence? I'm like, they're talking about a guy who gave a statement 5 years ago, and then they lost the statement. And it was like, he did it voluntarily. It wasn't like people use the word he admitted it. I'm like, he went and gave a statement because they were asking for everybody that was out at the bridge that day to come and say, hey, we need to know who was out there. We need to know what you saw, what you observed, if anything, and he did that. And I'm just looking at it, and I'm like, and then you get to the unspent casing, and they're very careful. In Indiana, there's a couple of different, there's Fry and there's Daubert, which are what lawyers use to kind of litigate whether or not something is going to get to be admissible at trial in terms of being scientific evidence.
What are those cases about? Like, just
I mean, they basically are tools that were Supreme Court cases that the Supreme Court gave courts to try to determine whether or not something is viable scientifically, that it gives value in terms of the jury being able to say, yeah, this is legitimate science. It tries to weed out junk science. So, and Indiana doesn't really follow either of those, so it's like, and at that point,
follow some equivalent there too, just not
really don't. They really don't
test their scientific evidence before they let it in.
Not really. Like, it's different.
What stood out to me was what led to Richard Allen. I think that's still sealed, I guess. Like, because when Dan texted me, like, I know that we know that the Dan Doolin, there was some sort of he came forward, and that was quote unquote misfiled. But I remember the FBI coming forward soon after and saying that wasn't us. We didn't misfile anything. So I'm wondering, and I'm just speculating. Did someone call in? Did someone call in and say it could be my dad? It could be. I don't know what led to that search.
I do know they did bring in a fresh set of eyes, the task force, right, to kind of go. And Carter always said that when we talked to Doug Carter, superintendent ISP, he always said, like, when we get to the end, we'll go back to the
We'll
beginning.
go back to the beginning. I can hear his voice. We'll go
And
back to the
yeah,
beginning.
he said it much more dramatically than I. But he, from what I understand, they did bring someone in, and perhaps it was this person. Like, wait, what's this?
That's when it got. From what I understood, that's when it got unearthed. Is when they came in and they did that. They relooked at everything, and somebody
they unearth a missing document, and then they decide this is the guy.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think that's what put them on it. They're like, look, because like my thing had always been, well, Doolin, when we look at the presser on the 15th of February, when they released the first photograph of Bridge Guy, and Doolin's standing there. He's at the presser.
I know. I feel so bad. I hate naming Doolin. I do, because here's what I think. Personally, in assessing all of this, maybe he looked at it as like he was a witness instead of like
those early days of the investigation. I think it's pretty fair to say were chaotic from the investigation standpoint, right?
In that town in Delphi, right?
Yeah, there was more agencies just kept coming in, and I think they were organizing it as they went. They never dealt with something this big before. You had a bunch of stakeholders. You had Carroll County, you had Indiana State Police, you had the FBI.
And Dan, if this is any example, on the April, was it 19th or 22nd, the New Direction presser?
Yeah, 2019. Yeah.
2019, April 22nd.
Mhm.
So it was these very nice, sweet older ladies who were at a table, volunteers who were like, "Excuse me, miss, have you signed in?" And I had so many live shots. I'm back and forth, back and forth. And "Excuse me, miss, have you signed in?" I said, "I have, thank you." But I think that in hindsight, I'm like, did they think that he was going to come in and be like, "I'll sign in"?
Apparently they did, because the Carter said he may be in this room right now.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
they were big on getting me to sign. They thought he was going to sign in, I think.
I mean, we know,
Well,
like in
yeah,
terms
that's
of law enforcement, they always
up.
videotape funerals, because it's known that sometimes killers will show up to
Wow.
funeral. They know that they'll show up when they're processing the crime scenes.
so.
With Alan, it was
Alan
different.
show up? Was he there?
No, but
No, because there were so many cameras that people would have noticed it. But Doug Carter said, I'm sure, because I asked him after, he goes, I'm sure he was watching. And the biggest fear at that point from the families, after it had been 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, it was, he's going to do this again. So I said to Doug Carter, which you would ask, is that a fear? He said, if he could do that, he could do it again. Yeah, that's a fear. And I think he always spoke directly, like down the barrel of the camera.
That is something that is
Having
always.
living need you, it could happen again, and it'll be on your shoulders. They went as far as to say that, and they didn't get the call.
This is something that's always really bothered me not bothered me, but just always been a big mystery, is that, the way the crime scene was described to us, but by Robert Ives, and he said this on our show, was that there were signatures at this crime scene, and now we know that, and like just the type of. We've talked to FBI profilers, and we talked to law enforcement agents about everything we were learning at the time while we were doing the podcast. This seems like the type of murder that gets repeated, right? It's just strange to me, and thank God it hasn't. But I'm just it's surprising given the nature of this kind of crime,
right?
The details.
I was on Dr. Oz soon after. I didn't, and now that I know what I know. Were there signatures? I mean, could it have been signatures to throw someone off? Like, were there? I expected it to be.
You don't
But
just
Robert Ives told us
the first time like that. I don't think that I can't imagine that there's any FBI person, profiler, or anyone else who's going to tell you that is the typical, or even something you would ever expect to see from somebody killing somebody one time.
Ann Bergerus, I interviewed for one of my chapters, and she said, there's no way. And so 44, if it is Richard Allen, 44 at the, meaning she didn't say no way. I don't want to put words in her mouth.
Right.
It's extremely rare, just like what you said. So
I just want to be clear
44
about
years old at the time, 50.
Yeah, the age is rare. Yeah, his age bracket is definitely rare.
You wake up 44, you want to slaughter two girls.
What Robert Ives told us was that the signatures, that way and for those who don't know, Robert Ives was the Carroll County prosecutor at the time of the murders, and he was there for a few months. So he was seeing a lot of the evidence.
He was the only one talking.
He was assigning the PC. Yeah, he was signing the PCs that were coming in the search warrants. As during the early days of the investigation. What he told us was that the signatures were. Let me just I want to be exact in my wording. They were odd. They were unusual. And if this crime happened again, everyone expected to see those same signatures.
Well, what were they, Dan?
Well, we didn't know that at the time.
Well, now, what do you think they were?
Well, I mean, now,
Although,
we have
Six?
well, plus you've got the transfer of blood from.
But I still don't know what they are, honestly.
Well, again, this is one of those seeing is believing things. So, what do you see when you look at those? That probably defines what you believe. Do you see runes? If so, that's going to lead you to,
But if he said we expect to see them again, what are they?
Well,
I'm
they
not
definitely
asking
would
you, Dan.
include the transfer of blood
Right.
from one person to the other, the changing of clothes from one person to the other.
Yeah. He wasn't
And-
specific at the time because they were still keeping they were still keeping the details of the crime scene real close. So, he wouldn't answer those questions. Right. But now that we know more about what was at the scene, it's a little unfair to infer a statement that was made a few years ago from Robert Ives to information that we're getting now. Right. But, if you are putting two and two together here, what were the signatures at this particular scene? Yeah. I mean, however you want to interpret it, there were six placed.
Because, and I mentioned this a lot, because there was a wall of silence.
Yeah.
Any break in that silence, we took it as like, this is it. This is it. I mean, so.
But you've gotten a break in that silence. You've gotten it through the memo.
Right.
Yes. I mean,
A break in the gag order, maybe not in the silence.
Yeah. I mean, so the memo, obviously there are things in that memo that, are objectively true, right? There are
Right.
details.
Well, Bob brought this up and I took it to, obviously it was in the discovery, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
It was stuff in the discovery. I can't get into that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was, look, there were details from the crime scene that were released that had never been released before. There was vague information about what happened in those crime scenes and other information that had leaked previously from other PCs, but nothing to that level of detail. And
Well, I can't get into that. I really don't know. The truth is, none of us really know. I can't wait for trial where we will know.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
I'm very, very extremely confident, not about anything they were surmising from what they saw, but when they say, the blood, certain things are found on one body, certain things are found on another body, the exchange of
Absolutely.
all of those facts happened. And then, like you said, whether somebody sees a rune or doesn't see a rune or whatever the case may be, there was something else going on there as well. But I would suspect that the things that like experts are talking about wanting to see again are those actual literal things that I take at 100% face value that they actually occurred, because no lawyer is going to, make up things about where DNA was found and where clothes were found. And, but like you said,
right.
Our system must look bizarre to other countries. I don't know. I mean, I feel like we have a system that works, but I feel like the delays and everything that you guys have been talking about that we're going through, no matter what you believe or how you feel, and the judges and the lawyers and the delays. And when Paul said that to me during that October 31st, I thought, okay, he knows this from Golden State Killer, but that was Golden State Killer. Oh my gosh, was he right? And it's like, really, like, because the families trust me, they'll be watching this. It's hurtful and it sucks.
Yeah.
And so anything we talk about, what I know is a rune, what you know is a rune, we don't know.
Yeah.
And that's why we all want to see a trial.
well, and that's why I like, to tell you the truth, that's why I get upset, because in my mind I'm thinking, God, what if it's not right and these families have been put through all of this, and now it's like it's
That'd be the worst if
Well,
it wasn't.
yeah.
That's what
And like that,
Yeah.
my end game, and you guys know, I mean, Susan, I've been on with you.
I hope they have the right guy. It just scares the shit out of me that they don't. to be
Right. Well, and that's my thing, and I know as to what Allison was saying that Rosie and Baldwin aren't going to be lying about what they've seen in terms of the discovery. Like the photographs that they're looking at when they're writing the memo. Now that is all interpretation to what we were all saying. One person may interpret it, and it's classic state and defense. That is the law. That is a
And
trial. You have
who am I to argue it? I promise I'm not one to argue it. It's just
Yeah.
I hope everyone gets it together for trial.
Can I
Yeah.
ask you guys a question
Yeah.
about that memo? Like from a was any of that information actually necessary for a Frank's motion aside from the Liggett stuff?
No.
You know the answer.
I know
No,
it's a rhetorical answer.
There was
pages,
some
the
of
Liggett
it,
stuff
an
Mm.
argument that could have been made to the distinctiveness of the scene and the uniqueness of the scene that speaks to a different person having done this, but without having it to be so, because it's like you feel like as the lawyer, like the judge, someone needs to talk about the fact that this scene doesn't match this man. These two don't fit. So I can understand why they would be coming out of their heads thinking we've got to just get this out there, because the judge doesn't read discovery. The judge
Right.
doesn't know the crime scene. The judge knows nothing. So
But wait, like Jose Baez saying it was Casey Anthony's father, she drowned in the pool. Say it like O.J. Simpson's attorney. I mean, just do it at trial. Don't do it before. That I
Well,
felt like snowballed
but
on
what
it.
she's saying for the Frank's memo, though, they're trying to, that it's a legitimate memo in terms of, and the Franks is in a legitimate hearing if you can get to it. And it's a very high standard to get a judge to say, hey, you know what, I'm looking at it. I'm going to decide that law enforcement was not honest when they stepped in front of this judge.
You're right.
In terms of what Allison was trying to say, in terms of they were trying to bolster the claims that Liggett had not been truthful or had fudged facts, and in terms of stepping in front of Diener to get that
Mhm.
original
I see that.
arrest warrant, and to bolster it. That's why they brought in some of the crime scene and how it looked in terms of it doesn't seem to fit with, number one, a single individual doing this. And two, it doesn't seem to fit with this 5'4" guy, having dominion and control over the girls, knowing that the girls were not shot. You know what I mean? So I think there were certain aspects of it that were useful. I
It could
have no
been done
problem
differently
personally.
either way. You know what
For
I mean?
sure, it should never have been 136
But
pages
the
long.
painting of that picture had some importance to it. And if they didn't do it written out, they could have done it at the hearing, but you don't even get it, she didn't even give them a Frank's hearing, which is unusual. But I mean, we've gone
I
to
understand. Yeah.
we've gone to hearings where we're struggling with the same thing, trying to pull out all the things that point to it being someone else, and the fact that all of these details were left out. And to corroborate that, it's like, because by the way, all those details that were left out point in another direction, which technically isn't relevant to the Franks hearing, right? You don't need to tell them there's another suspect that this fits. But that's why Bob's saying it's like you're trying to explain all of the things that were painted as not true, and then show that it was intentional by bringing out how clearly evident something, and that's the part we don't know, right? That's the part where, like, how clearly evident is it that it's odinistic, or that it's this, or that it's
Right.
that? We don't know. But what we do know is it describes a kind of scene that points to a different type of perpetrator, and all of the things that make the scene that speak to that, whatever
Yeah.
the guys were talking about this and that, were left out of here, which left the judge with an unfair picture of what we're dealing with in order to decide, probable cause. But
And you
and
bring up
Bob spoke
yeah,
to the
go ahead.
lawyers a lot more than
Uh-huh.
me. I don't know anything. So I would say there's definitely some gamesmanship in the amount of facts that were put in from people, and I don't mean to say it in a bad way, but I think from people who are saying, hello, wake up, something's not right here, someone pay attention, someone do something. And it's sometimes when police make that decision, to
I
someone's
mean,
arrested now,
what I took from the memo and what kind of rocked me the most was not them and look, as a defense attorney, I appreciate the fact, because you guys as reporters back in the old day, you've been used to law enforcement and the prosecutors having the only word. Like when
Sure.
those PCAs come out, that is the only narrative that we are told. And the one thing I could tell you is that Holman and Doug Carter and Liggett were not there when this took place. Nick McClelland and Ives were not there. So like what I'm saying is they're coming with their theory of the case based on the same evidence that the defense is looking at. And typically in 99% of cases that we are following in this country, that is the only narrative that is heard for years. Well, it takes 2 to 3 years to get to trial. This is an unusual case where the defense, in order to try to even the playing field, brought out their theory of defense. Now, there's a valid argument that was a mistake, that it would have been a better idea to surprise them at trial.
That's always been my personal
right, because like they didn't have to disclose anything because it was all in the evidence that was tendered to them. So it wasn't as if they had dug up anything up independently. It was in what they were given to McClelland. So they wouldn't have had to say, okay, look, here's our alternate suspects, because they were right there for you. You had the
Yeah.
state. And what
One thing
know
I
what I
keep
mean?
trying to remember about that Richard Allen PC is that we're not the intended audience for that, right? It was the judge that they wanted to sign it, right? And all they really needed to put in that was enough to convince the judge, yeah, there's probable cause.
Yeah, that's not how it works, though.
Really? No, I mean,
Well, I
like,
mean, it
yeah,
does and it doesn't. It does
Yeah.
and it doesn't, but it depends. Like typically they're holding something back if they think that there's like another suspect out there. Or I mean, some states attorneys will tell you, yeah, you just probable cause is a really low burden. You're just going to put in what you need and call it a day. But in your typical, we're actually seeing, they lay out most of the facts of the case so that they can prove it. And here, having so little, like,
Yeah.
One thing
where
I
you're
keep-
making you scratch your head, like what even got the judge to sign it?
I think,
is-
Allison, you make great points, because I think, and if you rewind to when I first met the families and was there, it was always, I remember it was Detective Holman, as you mentioned, Bob, uh, and walking through, and it said like, shush. It was a sign that they made, like the media could be listening. I mean, they decided early on that nothing was getting out. So if you starve the media and the public, and you ask, here's the tip line, one more tip, that piece, that puzzle piece that we're missing, it could be you could help solve this crime. That to me is a perfect storm of where we are now. It's like, we're not saying anything, but we need you. It's like, well, where do we go from here?
One thing I think keeps getting lost in sort of the Richard Allen portion of the story is at that same hearing that
Don't mention other names.
I'm not going to mention other names, but you know who I wish would? Nick McClelland, because remember at that November 22nd, 2022 hearing, he said we have reason to believe that there are other actors involved in this.
Prosecutors say that? Is that the norm?
He
to
did.
say?
Right.
He did.
Do
And he said,
I don't
he
know.
said it in the hearing, and I think maybe that was his argument to keep the PC sealed at the time, and maybe giving him the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps that was the reason for the PC being so detail light, because it was still an active investigation. Perhaps they were anticipating another arrest at some point soon. I don't know, but
Right.
And,
I know
and
if
Bertram,
you arrest somebody else too, meaning two people, that's going to
yeah,
probably resolve a lot of the doubt and I do not know enough facts right now, obviously, to say
I don't either.
right, if they've got the right person. All I can say is that based on what I've seen thus far, it seems like there might be someone else, maybe in conjunction with, still out there, because the the picture we have right now of this one person and the limited background he has
Yeah.
isn't coming up equaling, the right answer. So
Yeah.
I just hope if there's someone else out there, they are still looking for that someone else, and they still,
One thing Ann Berger said to me, where she was the most skeptical in the chapter in the book, she was like, I don't know, it doesn't sound right. I don't. And
Yep.
her question was, and she said, how do you get two girls under your control? Well, if anyone showed me at age 13 a gun, I'm under their control.
Right.
Like I just am. I'm scared to death. I don't know. So that would be my thought. But she said, and her thought was, though, I said, in situations like this, we were definitely very broad, not knowing anything. And this was 2022 when I interviewed her. She said, it's tough to get someone else to do something with you. That's more risk that they're going to tell on you or you're going to tell on them. But she was speaking in general and her experience. And what was the Netflix show, Dan, about her?
Oh, Mindhunter. Yeah.
Yes, she's
Yeah,
like
Dr.
one of
Ann.
the. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm just so in awe of her. But
A conspiracy really rarely survives two people, right?
It's
what-
true. I mean, yeah, loose lips sink ships. And I was on with Joel with Dr. Ann, who I adore.
oh my
and
gosh, isn't she the best?
she's a treasure,
Yeah.
absolutely a treasure, and she's brilliant. And I was like, my thing about, and I'm going to go ahead and disagree with Allison about the PCAs. It maybe in a typical PCA, but in a case like this, where it's a massive case, a nationally followed case, they're putting their best foot forward. They're not holding back powerful evidence. They're going to put it all in there. I think that when they went forward
Who's
with
it up to? The prosecutor to put?
yeah, for sure.
Uh,
Like in a case like this, law enforcement is going to work in conjunction with the prosecutor to prepare the PCA,
And I
because
don't mean to cut you off, Bob, and I want you to say your point, but I just wanted to say Susan's point, if that's what they were somehow trying to do, specifically be overly as little as possible because they were worried about the media and,
or
but
compromising another
sorry, go ahead,
investigation,
babe.
an ongoing investigation for a second potential person.
they were definitely
Right.
guarded and afraid. It's unlike, I'm sure, anything you guys have seen, anything I've seen.
So
yeah,
go
but
ahead.
you have to know is the prosecutor that it's going to be under attack by the defense, right? So there's an element of knowing you can't come in. Yes, it's a lower burden in terms of PC, but it still has to be enough to withstand an attack by the defense in terms of it being insufficient, which they did when they came in with that motion to let bond, where they wanted to say, hey, you know what, this isn't even enough for you to hold him on bond. And that ended up not happening. And that got converted into a suppression motion, which then got converted into that safekeeping hearing back in June. And, and I'm attending all these things, and I just understand how it works. But so when the memo drops, what strikes me, and I'm always thinking about the families, and I'm always understanding that the families put all their faith into law enforcement. They
Right.
put all their faith into Nick McClelland, and they're whispering in their ears, we got the right guy, we got the right guy, we got the right guy, we got the right guy. And then when the memo drops, you're the families, and they're hearing, like you said, they're hearing and seeing the same thing, like the exact same things that we are. And you're hearing that the unified command had abandoned whatever concept of, like an Odinistic, ritualistic type thing, that they kind of buried the lead with this professor who said, yeah, it's unusual. It doesn't look like your typical crime scene. And then they start naming names. And one of the names happens to be somebody who admits to being at the scene. True or not true, it's got to give the family a lot of pause and cause a lot of consternation, because it's one of those cases that if they don't get it right, the likelihood that they actually go and get it, like another arrest, is very, very slim. Like, it just, like, think of another case, try to think of a different case, a high profile case like this, where in any case where there's an acquittal and then they make another arrest after.
Right. One
you
thing that stood out to me as you were talking, Bob, which was, I remember on the 31st, it was Superintendent Doug Carter, who always, you could tell what a leader he was, but always said, like, it's on me, don't blame anyone else. They stay up late, they care about the girls, and they do. But he did say, we have to support McClelland. I remember, I'm paraphrasing here, but you kind of saw on his face, like, okay, he's not gonna give you much, but we're trusting him. It was almost like he was like, ugh, because
Yeah, it's
we're not
it's
gonna release a lot. It was just, it could be a case study in hindsight, right? Of what to
Yeah, I
tell the
mean, the
public,
thing
what
that
to
has to
not.
worry you is that there's, the unified command, which is made up of 6 guys, from different agencies, and then you've got these 3 other cops who, one of them was killed in front of a federal building, Ferenczi. You've got Click and you've got Murphy, who all took it upon themselves to continue to investigate that very different angle that was abandoned by the unified command, to the extent where, and I know the murder sheet put out this statement, the first half of Click's thing, where we're like, no one in law enforcement thinks it was a ritual sacrifice. Well, that's just a broad proclamation that they don't think that it was actually somebody doing an actual
Don't
sacrifice.
bring
That
up the
doesn't.
murder sheet. I like the murder sheet.
No, I wasn't saying anything bad about the murder sheet.
Okay, good.
What I'm saying is, but they didn't play the rest of Click's thing, that we don't think that it's Richard Allen until later. They played in a different episode that, like, so when Click is writing Nick McClelland a letter, which we know is factual, like that part of the, like, these are the parts of the memo that people need to kind of be aware of and realize that this isn't, Baldwin and Rosie making up lies. That, like, Nick McClelland, like, was sent a letter by Click saying, like, hey man, like, I need for you to make me understand why Richard Allen was arrested in this case, because the evidence that we turned over to you is more powerful than what you've got on this guy. And that gets buried. And so, like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, when, like, 'cause I can't help but think about the families in this, because they've been tortured for 7
I
years
just
now.
have a random question and tell me your thoughts.
Yeah.
Do you think a gag order is to prevent all of this from us even speculating, me being here pretending I know what I don't know? I truly don't know any of this in terms of the investigation. I can only speculate. Um, or should it be your like a speedy trial, and so we don't have enough time to? I just wish we knew more of the evidence. I
I
guess.
mean, like, gags are like, there's people confuse, like, what a gag order is, where lawyers and people associated and, that are working on the case, either in an attorney capacity, clerks, law enforcement, that they can't talk to the press. That's a different thing. Like, the attorneys, in terms of that, like, them filing a pleading and citing facts, is not violating a gag order, because they're not, like, we
What
can,
is
like,
though? 'Cause
is
I'm
it
glad you. I wanted to ask you guys that, because what is like, if I talk to like the families feel like they don't want to obviously mess up anything, like they can't talk to people, and I
Well,
feel like
that's a gag order. Like, the
They
families, if
should ask their
Patty's,
lawyer, because I don't think that the court has the ability to gag them. I don't know for
but
sure
they
that
don't.
they have.
I'm assuming. I'm just guessing this.
no, they
If it
did,
were me, I would
they
play on
did
the
gag
safe
them.
side. I'd be like, I don't know. I don't want
They did. I told you, Allison, they gagged the families, just like they did in Idaho 4, which they were litigating
But
in
can
Idaho.
they? Oh, in Idaho 4, they litigated it, and another court said they are allowed. They have the
No,
jurisdiction.
they brought it in front of the same
One thing I
judge.
do know about the families in this case
Can
is
the
that
Idaho family talk? Sorry, Dan, go on.
yeah, the one thing I know about the families in this case is that from the jump, they've probably known a little more information than the public, and they voluntarily, at the request of the police. I don't think
Right.
it's a big ask for them,
No,
to like not say anything.
Totally.
So that,
Maybe they knew a little more. Yeah,
yeah,
maybe.
I mean, not the goods, but obviously,
right,
if you're the police, you're updating the family as much as you can without compromising the investigation. And
Right.
one would hope that's more than the public was getting in this particular story, right? But I do know that.
Maybe, but when I talked to Becky that night
Mhm.
when she was at the wedding, she said she heard from the news.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't know how much
I
they.
mean, like, and we see it all the time from the defense attorney's side of it, that law enforcement, by necessity, is typically not going to keep the families in the loop in terms of the investigation. And once it gets to an arrest phase, the prosecutors typically are not giving updates to the family as to the strength of the case, for many reasons. But first and foremost, because of that same concept of a conspiracy involving multiple people, you cannot have a situation where one family member may mention something to somebody, and then it gets out, and it's something that they don't want leaked out to the public. So they have to act guardedly with it.
and I, being a little bit more skeptical of law enforcement, because you have to remember a prosecution's case is only as strong as the underlying investigation. And as I told Bob last week, in the day and age where we are seeing plain as day police corruption all over the place, it has to give people pause that, who's provided the information to the state that the state now has to use, and could there be issues there, because you're only as good as the information that you get. So another reason I think that police also keep things very close to their chest is because sometimes their thoughts are still developing. So they don't want to lock themselves in by giving you anyone. I'm not being specific to this case by any means, but you know what I
No,
mean?
it
Like,
makes
it's like
sense.
they need to give themselves that wiggle room that they might just need if things end up being slightly different than they think it is, but they still sure they have the right person. They're
It
just
makes sense. They have a tough job too, you know.
Well, right, and they're doing the best they can with the evidence that they have, and but you have to take into consideration, like, you just can't ignore the fact that 3 separate cops continued for months to investigate a completely different line of investigation than the unified command. And like, God
I'm not
forbid.
following you on that. I don't even know that. What is
Yeah, well, I mean, we know it because it was in the memo. It's
Yeah,
it's
I,
Click, Ferenczi, and Murphy. They wrote a 50 or 85-page memo about their, they named multiple suspects that they felt were. I mean, that's straight
I
from the
can't wait.
discovery.
Bring him on. Let's see him on the stand. I
I
mean,
mean, they're going to have to. I mean,
Well,
in terms
this
of.
just brings me back to, there's someone else out there that also needs to be arrested. I'm not saying Richard Allen didn't do this, but what I'm saying is the police need to continue to investigate to bring in whoever else was
for like
involved.
aiding and abetting, or
McClellan said that in open court. There was a gag order, and we haven't heard anything about it since. Right.
Right.
And I don't know if we're going to, unless until there is a trial, or if there is another arrest. Like, it was almost a throwaway line in a way, right? It was one line, then move on. But it really jumped out to me that he said that this is still an active and ongoing investigation.
It's got to be there. You need the persons whose mind created the scene that you guys saw, because that person's computer, or not see, right, that exists in the world, because that person's computer is going to be filled with perverse.
It has to be.
I mean, there's going to be signs of an evil mind, or a sick mind, or a compulsion.
Or somebody that has learned how to make their fake runes, or some version of a rune. Like, and that, if you look at, I can't remember if it's paragraph 6 or paragraph 7 of the introduction of the memo.
Look at you knowing the paragraphs. That's a long.
Yeah, man, I'm all up in this thing. But like
paragraph 7, page 8.
Right.
It's something like that. And the thing that should be worrying everybody is the fact that they found nothing on any of Richard Allen's.
You guys are attorneys. Come on. We should all have faith in the justice system, right? Overall.
Well, yeah. I mean, but like, we should have faith in the system of justice that we go under. But like, you can't have blind faith in law enforcement or prosecutors or defense.
Nobody does. Nobody does.
But what I'm saying is, what we know for a fact
is
that they found nothing on Richard Allen's phone connecting him to the girls on any of his devices, and they took everything.
Did it also say that there was no? Did it get into the details about no porn, no runes, no? I mean, I guess
I got a question from me not knowing anything.
No connections to Odinism, no connections to the girls. So, like, how do the girls go? Which leads that Richard Allen would have, if the state's theory is correct, that means that he just ambled out to the bridge that day.
A question. Wait, shoot. What were you saying at first that was on that page that was
they found no evidence on his electronics of any communication.
Oh, is that true? Is that's absolute?
That is true, because they wouldn't.
That's absolute. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope. And
if the judge could have called him a liar, like if there was something that said otherwise, you can be guaranteed that would have come out. I've said
this before. I'll say it again. That the families, I don't even have to speak for them. It's common sense. would want the
Right.
right guy in custody, of course, because
Right.
that's what they told me was their biggest fear, which is if this guy could do it. Even Carter, who never said much ever throughout the years I've spoken to him, said, I said, do you think he'll do it again? He said, anyone capable of doing that can do it again. So that was like, oh my gosh, could he do it again? Like, you guys have what, 5 kids? Imagine, like, you can't even go there, right?
I can't even go
So
there.
it's that's okay, someone's in custody, whatever, innocent until proven guilty. So that's why I'm looking forward to the trial, I guess, is my point. And I know that people want to argue the memorandum. I say whatever is fact is fact. I don't argue against or
I
for.
don't think we know all of them. I don't think we know all of the facts yet. You know,
I know we definitely don't know all.
Yeah.
We definitely don't. I don't think that we know.
So don't
that
get mad at
much
me in the
more.
comments. I promise I know none of this.
There's not that much more that we learned from that memo other than the picture of the crime scene. And again, like we've said, with some interpretation of that as well, but some of it that's actual fact. And it's that picture, the same picture that you guys have gotten information from without the details, but from professionals that are like, if this person kills again, you're going to be expected to see certain things. Whatever those things are, speak to a profile of person that this guy doesn't fit. Doesn't mean he wasn't involved, didn't, whatever. Doesn't mean he's completely unrelated, but it surely screams there's someone else that needs to be.
And if there is, going back to that McClellan statement, reason that we have reason to believe there are the potential for other actors to be involved. You think we know they're holding stuff back because if everything was in that PC, then something that reflects that information, that belief that someone else is involved would be in that PC, right? To make that nexus.
Well,
Right.
yeah, and I think ultimately the way that the crime scene was set up and the fact that if you're talking about, because I always agreed with Susan when we knew early on, just by kind of intuitively, that the girls had not been shot, that they had been killed with a sharp weapon, and which to me that same question that Dr. Ann asked, how do you control two feisty young girls, who are if Bridge Guy's the guy who appeared to be in much better shape than that guy. How are you having control and dominion over them? So naturally, my first thought was a gun. So that's how you control. But getting down that terrain, crossing the river, and maintaining that kind of control as one person is very, very difficult for me to believe in terms of. And then are you buying like I don't even want to get into the speculation of what could have gone on because the memo did it for us, right? And that was one of the things where I was like, they didn't need that. That was the thing that we didn't need to show how impossible it would be for one guy to do it. But again, the thing that really struck me, and again, and I want to restate it so that everybody understands what I'm saying, that this is factual, that they found nothing on Richard Allen's, any of his devices, his computers, all of his own phones. And this guy had everything still in his house. The Carhartt, the blue, he had everything. This is a guy he didn't throw anything away, didn't get rid of weapons, didn't do anything.
And Burgess did mention that was odd. She did mention that.
It's not what criminals do. Like typically they try to get rid of evidence so that if the chickens are going to come over roost, they don't have the evidence at their house. But and there is no hiding. There is no deleting information off of cell phones. It doesn't exist with Cellubrite anymore. So what I'm suggesting is, if they're saying they found no connection to the girls of Richard Allen, meaning that he drew them out to the bridge somehow, or no connection with anybody else who may have had contact with the girls, because they're cross-referencing every phone number that's on Richard Allen's devices. They're looking for that. They're looking for, how did the girls end up out there and the killer just happens to be there? Because otherwise your theory is that Richard Allen woke up with a mind for murder that day, just walked out to the bridge, and Abby and Libby were just
I was smiling because I was looking at your daughter. How old is she? She's so cute.
Yeah, we had somebody complain that she shouldn't be on our lives.
Why?
Yeah,
but
we
Why?
don't.
We don't.
Yeah, we don't.
Well, here was a thought from Paul Holes. And while I was looking down, I was looking for a quote from Diane Erskine, who's Anna's mother, who's Abby's grandmother, who said, look, it's not for me to investigate. I trust the police, So throughout, they kind of left it as, it's not me to get, of course, how much you can take to try to investigate. I mean, what you guys are saying, a lot of it's over my head too. But what Paul did say to me, and it stood out, he said, look, someone like that, and based on his plethora of serial killers and experience and knowing what he knows, is that you can think about it, and I'm generalizing, let's say it's not Richard Allen, a random person at the bridge, that you can fantasize and sit there and wait in waiting and year after year and finally think, okay, is this my
Today's
moment?
the day. Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
that is definitely possible. I
I don't
think
know if
what's
that's true.
more
Mhm.
telling, and maybe I misread the memo, or maybe I'm not remembering. You've read a lot more, that there was nothing like no other unusual, history. And where's the plotting with the other people? Because again, I am sorry, you're telling me he's got the same shoes, jacket, clothes, and pants from a scene that has been described to have involved a lot of exchange of bodily fluids. I'm trying not to say blood, but now I made it sound worse, so I said blood.
No, I know.
Um,
I understand what you're saying. I get it.
so I'm just saying, like, that where's the other person that you're texting with about, I'm running late, something unusual happened, or meeting up with these other people, or like Bob said, if you're not an Odinist, you need to research to make your fake Odinist scene. And that's the other thing that was in the memo, that there was no history. That part's right? That there was no history of Odin searching.
Either
Nothing.
thing. To
Right.
either thing. And that's what I was just saying, like Allison, about that they would have been cross-referencing his phone records in order to see who he's communicating with, in order to get, to get the.
But I don't think the
meat.
girls were necessarily lured out there. I do believe somehow, some way, it was a
Happenstance.
Yeah,
what
because
do
I
they call
remember
that?
Becky saying
Minds.
to Paul on stage, going back to that in Las Vegas, and she had always said to me, it didn't seem, because think about the last day that you ever see your granddaughter or your daughter, the last day, the last moments. And she said, Libby didn't seem to be in a rush, meaning I have to be there at this particular time.
Right.
He kind of was like, oh, can you take, Kelsey, can you take us? And Grandma, can we go? So it was kind of like a laissez-faire kind of, not, we have to, we're late, we're going to meet this person.
And a
So
mom would pick up on that. I mean, it's like the way I caught when she was 14-year-old sneaking out, is that she told me she was going to the movies, but in the exact same way, had no care about the time. She didn't seem to be worrying what time she was leaving the house. She wasn't in a rush, so.
In terms of what time the show started, right?
Right.
Based on all the information we know, like this just seems like the kind of crime that was very carefully planned, but the victims were not. It was a trap.
I don't know,
You'd
man.
expect to see that planning on someone's devices somewhere.
Yeah, like I just.
Well, I mean, not if the planning takes place in your head. Like that. Like if you know if you know that area, if you've been in that area, a lot of people are out there hunting, fishing, walking. Like if you've been doing that for decades, and I'm not making a case for or against Alan here. I'm just having been out there myself. There's if that's all.
There's not that many people out there. It's very isolated.
Yeah, you probably had your spot picked. This was a planned crime.
Maybe planned for 20, maybe even planned for 10 years or so. And I even asked Paul, and he was saying, based on my experience, he's generalizing, of course, but I said, well, if that, was anyone in custody? Yeah, Richard Allen was in custody, but he just said, you may be able to keep that as a fantasy and not act. Because my question was, wouldn't you then do it again?
Yeah,
in the years after, and they said sometimes they use whatever.
Counter to that is that you're going to see, and my father represented John Wayne Gacy.
Yes, I remember that.
But like my point being is that there's a buildup, and if somebody has that kind of thought process, he's building over a decade. What, to Allison's point, was you're going to see evidence of it manifesting online in terms of the things that they're going to access. They didn't see any of this on any of Richard Allen's.
I don't think we know for sure.
Yes.
I don't know. I have to reread it. Does it
I
tell
know
you
for
sure there's nothing?
Dan and I aren't lawyers. Help. No.
Yeah, no, but like it's one of those things. And kind of the last thing I want to bring up about it is that when you look at the FBI affidavit for Ron Logan, when they first searched his property, because it was
right. If you read that, you'd say they got the guy. Right.
You look at it, it's on his property. And the thing that just always bugs me
Mhm.
about that affidavit, if you read it, and I just reread it last night, is the fact that there is no mention whatsoever of the unspent casing at all. How are you writing a
That's a
PCA?
good point. I've never thought about that with the Logan PC. Yeah.
Right.
That
Like,
is
how
shocking.
do you not include that the unspent casing is not mentioned anywhere? And this
That
was
is
prepared by the
shocking.
FBI.
You just dug a new rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Damn it, Bob.
So I don't know. My whole point being I'm concerned. I don't Richard Allen certainly could be the guy, and if he is, I hope to God that they got the evidence and that he goes down, but like
right.
I'm just like from a completely objective point of view, I'm concerned. I'm concerned for I'm just concerned, and
I don't know why, and I could be ignorance is bliss. I'm not. I feel like whatever they have, they're going to have, and that I feel like we could trust our system that the jurors are going to see the evidence or not see it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
it's
but
it's
Is that naive?
But what then you're left thinking, oh no, the family could be left thinking, oh no, my child's killer got away, instead of thinking the police need to continue to
I'm
investigate.
talking like after the trial, so I'm thinking like during the trial. I don't know. I have faith that the evidence will either prove it or not. Is that naive?
I mean, it depends on the evidence. Yeah, no, I mean that's the way the system's supposed to work. I mean, I wouldn't call it naive. I'd call it
They
optimistic.
don't have to prove his innocence. They have to prove his guilt, right?
Right.
And
Right. And if they have more, or if they
But what
don't,
about justice for the girls, as far as, let's keep it with, there's a very good chance there's a second killer out there, so the police should be looking. Like, instead of
presumably,
taking,
hopefully they are, right?
well, Becky said, I remember her, because I always said justice for Abby and Libby. I always said that. She said, not that she's against saying that, but she said, I don't know what that looks like. They're never coming back. It's really justice for, she said, justice, they're not, Libby's never coming back. They go on vacations. They bring a blanket that they have of her face. And, and when I look through her postings on Facebook, and if anyone's watching or listening and they'd like to support the families, go on Facebook, follow Becky. She posts pictures of Libby and Abby. It's just a great way to kind of
Yeah.
remember who we're talking about here, because it can get tied up in the legalese. Not that people don't care. It's just there's a lot going on legally.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a
So
lot.
what have you? I guess my gut is saying, as we move forward, it will hopefully justice will come, meaning that this person, whoever it is, won't be able to do it again.
Yeah, I mean that's for
Cheese
sure.
heads, LOL.
No, never, Dean.
Never happening, Dino.
Yeah, I think one thing we can all agree. Yeah, that's a great point. You want to know? I think one thing we can all agree. I don't think we've ever seen a case like this and the trajectory of it, and from the time it started to where we are now. The trial hasn't even started, and we've already been to the Indiana Supreme Court. I mean, this is something. Everyone, I believe, is playing by a new set of rules.
There's been a lot more lawyers, for the judge, for the lawyers, and the new lawyers and the other lawyers.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's been, I mean, I haven't
Well,
seen it like it. And we've been on, some crazy cases, but I haven't seen anything like this, and it's
and it really, like, our shift away from thinking about it more, like you're saying, on a personal level, about and being like what the hell's going on in the courts and the jail, and like the defendant's rights, mean something in these cases when there haven't been, convicted yet. But, so it's hopefully
and there's
they've
all
got,
this information that we're still not seeing. Like my colleague
Right.
Drew Iden, who is the host of Down the Hill, used to say on the show all the time, what we're looking at is, sort of a picture with only certain pieces filled in, and it's almost like an impressionist painting, right? And we only see what we want to see, and so now and then we're given another piece of that picture.
I think you're quoting Bernstein. Remember, you're quoting Bernstein. Remember, he said, "This is what you see."
Drew, did you steal from Bernstein?
What? What'd you say?
I was just calling out Drew. No.
No, but this is what you see. He said, remember that?
Yeah.
This is what you see on the TV. You don't see over here. You don't see over here. So there was all these kind of innuendos of what's going on. I'm looking forward to the trial.
Everyone is.
Mhm.
Hope we
Well,
get-
I mean, which is a whole nother can of worms that we'd need 2 hours to talk about in terms of, like
But
God, did
I
we
do
go
want
over
to
your
say
time?
this.
My gosh. Uh-huh.
I do want to say this. Even if the Franks memo wasn't necessarily the right place for all of those same facts, I would have been personally bringing those out in like the bond release motion. Because, for example, when you're for the bond, when it's a capital case or a case like this, it's whether the evidence is great, like, and that they're so by pointing to the fact that there are other suspects and there's all these other things that don't indicate it being the person who's arrested, so that there's no there's no reason that that information shouldn't have come out in court, other than sometimes as defense attorneys you want to keep your secrets to yourself, even though they're not secrets, but it's what you're
I think
doing with
it's-
it. It's right, you're taking the information and you're building a defense with it. When you hand it over to the other side, it kind of knocks the feet out of your defense. But at the same time, it sounds like, based on these two different sets of lawyers now basically saying the same thing, because the new lawyers said, we've looked at all the crime scene pictures, we've reviewed the evidence, and yeah, what they said in the Franks motion
Has merit.
has
But
merit.
are they friends?
No,
No,
they're not
no,
at all.
definitely not.
They don't know each other at all. They're from
And
like
the initial
two
theory was
lawyers
that
that now have withdrawn are from Allen County. They were handpicked by Gull. These two guys, like Rosie's from Logansport, and Andy's
And
got
I'm
a
all for it. If they see it, and then let's bring it.
yeah. I mean, they were definitely not friends. I would consider it to be a very antagonistic relationship in terms of you got two lawyers that were stripped off a case that had worked 1,000 hours on it, and it was their case. And then you had two guys that wanted to be on the case because it's Delphi.
Right. I mean, you couldn't make this up how bizarre it got,
Well,
right?
it's unbelievable.
And not to insinuate that but saying, hey, do you see this? Yeah, I see this. Meaning casual conversation, but you're saying, no, that didn't occur.
Yeah, I mean,
Again,
it did not occur. And I know from Kara, because Kara, when she was the attorney, the relator attorney who was advocating in the Supreme Court, like she had one conversation with those two guys. Like they were
but she
not
doesn't know any more about the underlying facts
right.
than any of
She
us
doesn't
do.
exactly. And she was like, they were just not cooperative. I mean, it's a kingmaker type case for a defense attorney. I mean, Jose Baez is not Jose Baez if he doesn't win Casey Anthony. Period.
I had a question, a question for you. So with opening statements that we've heard that seem so bizarre now in hindsight, do you have to tell the state your opening statement? Like, do you have to say everything that you're going to
You have
say?
an option. So there's two different ways, at least in Illinois and most of the states that I'm aware of. You can tell the court that you want to hold your opening statement until
Yes,
after
right.
the state goes. But I've never done it, even though, like, in your mind you're always thinking I should do that.
Good.
But
Right.
right, but you want the jury to be kind of having some things in the back of their mind as they're analyzing, because they're getting their whole case first, and then they're gonna, human beings being human beings, form
Yeah.
some opinions, not ones they're stuck on,
Out of the
but their
gate.
brain's gonna go certain ways. And if you haven't given them, I think, like a window to the other side, that's just my opinion. I don't know what's right. Bob and I have had that discussion before, like, man, should we just wait? But
That's so interesting to me because that is the law strategy. And I remember learning from Joey Jackson, lawyer extraordinaire, just an amazing person and defense attorney. But I remember him telling me that was an option, and he thought about that too, right? But you never really do it. You just think you can do it.
It's
Right.
hard. It's hard to leave that concept that you're gonna just let the state get their story out, and then you're waiting, and that's what's gonna percolate. Just like Allison said, that's all they've got rattling around in there because
But
the
do they
state's
have the
gonna take
transcript of transcript, so to speak, of your opening statements, or you don't have to share that with anyone? Like,
No, you mean prior to trial?
yeah.
No, no way.
Okay.
No, absolutely not.
And you don't have to say anything in your opening, but the whole point of it is to get to start to put that picture in the jurors' minds. Like if you weren't going to put everything into it, then maybe you'd wait till after, or if we had a case that was like a real baboom or something, maybe it would be something different. But it's
What's more stressful, opening statements or closing?
I'd say closings, right?
Yeah,
Well,
I would
openings are more kind of like structured and like you're where closings are more
argument.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I
you
mean,
can lay
right,
back
yeah.
your argument. So in that sense, I think they're easier. Closings are easier, but like you usually have a lead lawyer and a second chair, and the second chair does the opening and the lead does the closing, not because it's harder, but because that's where you get more dramatic effect and you can argue, as opposed to an opening. You're just supposed to be telling them what the evidence is going to show, but not drawing any inferences from it, not, pontificating about what it means, or, telling them what they should think about when they see it. You're just supposed to be telling them, you're going to hear from Bob, and Bob is going to tell you about the day that he was there and about when he saw this and when he saw that. But then you don't say, so if Bob didn't see this and see that, then you ask
Right.
yourselves while you're listening to this about blah, blah, blah. You don't
Yeah.
do,
It's too
it's
much.
just, right. It's just, this is what Bob's going to testify, and this is what so-and-so is going to testify. Then that kind of thing.
Off our topic, I couldn't take my eyes off of the Johnny Depp trial with Amber Heard. I just couldn't stop watching.
yeah,
I
people
didn't watch
that was
until a lot
civil.
of my
That
friends
was a
started
civil
asking
trial.
me questions. They were like, Allison, tell me this. And blah, blah, blah.
It
And I was
felt like a criminal trial, even though it was civil. You're
It
right.
did. It
You
did.
got to
It did
remind
feel like
yourself.
because there was a lot of talk about domestic abuse. It had a lot of elements of a criminal trial, even though it was
Also, with
civil.
her and the stand and the attorney for Johnny Depp, who I ended up meeting at CrimeCon, who I
Yep,
I
she
was
was
like, oh
there.
my gosh, you know.
Yeah, I was like, wow, he wins this. She got herself a career.
I felt that it was very helpful, very eye-opening for the defense bar, because it lets people see in a civil setting that you can't trust everything you hear, and that no matter which, for the people who were on either side,
point.
although most people had the same conclusion from, the way the evidence kind of came out, but that people lie, and
That's a great point. And then, I mean, he had a lot to lose to have it in front of the cameras, and that's what he wanted. And my God, did we see something we didn't think we'd see? So to me, you're absolutely right. It's like, wait till, I just couldn't stop watching that. I was like,
I
Everyone
mean,
what happened?
it was that kind of trial.
Yeah.
Like even the Gwyneth Paltrow just ridiculous ski thing, like that was like interesting to watch. It's like what I always tell people. I'm like, if you have a jury summons in your mailbox, don't dread it. Go to court. Like every trial, it doesn't matter how big or small, criminal or civil. When you kind of get stuck into the minutia of the
You're
case,
right. But I
it's
still dread it.
always
I'm like, no.
fascinating. Yeah, but it's always
I'd
fascinating.
be really upset if I ended up on a civil trial. I'd be like, oh,
Well, yeah, for us,
What if it's Johnny Depp? Right.
I've always wanted to be
Well-
on the jury, and it's tough as a lawyer that you're automatically bounced.
Speaking of, and from TV, I'm going to weave our way back to the topic. Do you think there could be jurors out there who don't know about this case, or maybe that's not the bar anymore? Maybe it's that
I do.
you've heard about it, and
you think that they can find people who haven't heard about it in their area?
Remember, they're importing the jurors from Allen County, which is
I mean, but it's still Indiana, the state of Indiana.
I guarantee you they can find jurors that have never.
How
heard
many jurors did you voir dire for Garcia?
300.
All right, and did anyone?
But that was in Douglas County. It was in the county that the crime occurred.
Can
know
you
what I
hear
mean?
about it though? Can I say, look, I've heard about it, but I feel like I can be impartial?
Yeah, well,
Yes.
that's how the judge cures it. The judge will say, because we'll try to get him off for cause. We'll say, Your Honor, we want to remove this juror for cause because they've basically admitted that they've reached a decision that is to innocence or guilt. And then the judge will say, okay, well, and he'll try to rehabilitate the jury, he or she will. And they'll say, okay, well, Mr. or Mrs. Juror, are you going to be able to follow the law? Okay. Are you going to be able to listen to the facts? Are you of the position that that nothing will ever change your mind as to what your position is? And if the juror says, no, I can follow the law. And yes, I'll listen to the facts. And yes, if it's a different decision than where I lay right now, I'm able to make that decision. Then the judge considers them rehabilitated. It's bullshit. Like it just is. It's like
Well, because when he's
that's just words, because what's in somebody's mind, like subconsciously.
One
it's
thing we've learned to
there.
not sequester jurors for a year, like in the OJ trial. I mean, can you imagine now?
Oh my God.
I think you can find people who don't. So what?
I
You'd be
do
surprised
too.
at what people don't know, right? Like one thing I used to do is
That's true. Even at CrimeCon, people didn't know about Delphi. I was doing a panel they hadn't
Totally.
heard of.
one thing I hated doing when I was at CNN and had to crank out a daily show was something called MOS, Man on the Street. That's you go out with a microphone or a camera and you ask, what do you think about
Worst.
what do you think
The
about this
worst.
big story? What do you think about this story? Like
They're great. No one knows
70% had no idea what I was talking about. The
No one
president
knows
did what?
anything, Dan.
They're like, what? I have 3 little kids. I don't watch the news. That's what
Right.
they'd always
Yeah.
say.
So I mean,
I could guarantee you I could drive to Allen County tomorrow, do man on the street interviews, and 7 out of 10 people are not going to know about the Delphi case.
Yeah,
In
Seven out
Allen
of
County.
10.
everyone watching this,
7 out of
we're so
10.
plugged in. It's almost crazy to us that people wouldn't have heard about this, right?
It's because it's our world. It's
Yeah.
like we lose sight of the fact that the rest of the world.
We lose sight of sanity.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
well,
remember-
but we lose sight of the fact that the rest of the world that's not obsessed with true crime doesn't give a shit about it, and they don't know anything about it.
I remember in
You know what I mean?
2009, I went and said, what do you think about I forget what it was. What do you think about the president's doing at the border? Like, what's Bush doing? Like, Bush isn't the president anymore, right? Like that. Those are the kind of, it's astounding. It doesn't seem like it should be, but it is.
Right. Yeah, like I feel very confident that they'll be able to pick an unbiased jury out of
So do
Allen.
I.
I just think that people, if they may have heard of it in Allen County, it's not their case, it's not their county, it's not their town, and that's what I'm saying. Like this case, as big as it is right now, it's still, you're not seeing the NBC or ABC News talking about it.
Yeah.
At length. It's court TV, it's law and crime, it's the true crime
And
world.
David, your show did a little, hits here and there, GMA, but you're right in terms of who's really doing this. And even Bob, as you know, and Allison at CrimeCon, I had to retell the story because not everyone knows it. So not everyone knows what we're talking about.
When we were there, like the memo had just dropped last year. So it was like, remember?
Yeah.
It just dropped and I was dying to talk about it. And my speaking engagement was to talk about Gacy. And I was like,
no way.
Trying to tell Elise, I'm like, I want to pivot. I want to talk about Delphi. She's like, no, we've already promoted it as Gacy. You're doing Gacy. I'm like, all right, fine. So, all right. Well, you guys.
Vinny said to me, because I too was I was on with Vinny and he said, what do you think? And I said, it reminds me of Casey Anthony. What's happening? He goes, you had to mention that. I said, I had to mention it. I didn't even read it. But anyway, you're right. It was a bizarre time for us to read it.
It was so unbelievable. All right. You guys promote your stuff right now. Give everybody the name of your YouTube channel. Let them know. Our people have been putting it, like the links have been flooded in the chat. So there's out there, but promote that thing.
I forgot we were live. It's 9:30.
Yeah, no. Well, that's why I'm trying to cut you guys some slack. We've been on for 2 hours.
No, thank you so much. Yeah, no, thank you for having us. Flew by. Our show's called Headline Crime. It's a weekly show. We're going to be expanding our presence as we grow, maybe more than once a week, and we're going to be working in lives as well. And the YouTube channel is also called Headline Crime. So please check it out and subscribe to that. My social is Avid Indoorsman.
And explain what that means. You can't just say that.
I don't like to leave the apartment.
I find it to be very self-explanatory, Dan.
It's scary out there.
I love it.
Avid endorsement, and he's going with it. He's leaning in.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
hilarious.
it's a lifestyle, and yeah, and so that's me on Twitter and Instagram. The Headline Crime TikTok is going to be live soon. And Susan, why don't you give your socials?
Oh my gosh, my daughter is 14, and I'm like, so what does it mean when I have 5 TikTok followers? And I'd say that on purpose, and
It
she
means you have 5 more than me. Yeah,
what's happening? I'm like, I don't know. So I
Susan,
don't
give
like
your
promoting myself. I'm sorry. Can someone
yeah,
else?
do
good
it.
gig,
Do
Susan.
it.
No,
We've
I'm
given
not doing it.
all right, so
Follow
Susan,
me. I'll punch you to Susan.
yeah, like we did like Susan, you guys buy Down the Hill. The book's amazing.
It is.
It's such a different insight.
And as Bob said, you can listen to it too because Kelsey
I
writes the
did.
forward, which is
It's
good.
amazing and it's great. It's on Audible. If you guys have Audible, it's a great way to go through the book
By
because
the
it
way,
really
that was
is.
the hardest thing
Like
I've
to
ever done in my
hear
life.
Kelsey,
I was
like,
going to ask you that, but we like
Just
we're
tracking
at
a
the
book.
end and we're trying to let you go. But I can't imagine how hard it must have been to cover a story like this and report on it the way you were, like with the victim's like sister hand
And they
in.
she was wonderful, and I felt so close.
yeah,
The hardest thing, number one, was I thought, okay, I'd like to write a book, and then having to do it, and then, but once I got into it, I kind of felt like I always joke, it's like Tom Hanks on the beach with the volleyball. I was like talking to myself at the end, but tracking
Wilson,
it,
good old Wilson.
I thought I talk for a living. I can do this. No, it's like your stomach growls, and this amazing studio that where I went in Atlanta. It was like if you take a bite of a green apple, you don't have as much saliva. So I'm biting a green apple and I'm holding a pillow because your stomach can growl and they pick up every sound. And there's certain words that I've learned over the years that I don't put in the scripts at TV. Like particularly, I just learned that because of the book. Particularly. So
Yeah,
it's like things that I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. The woman from New York who's amazing in audio with a shed. It's like, okay, this line. And it was 4 days, 4 hours a day, but I wanted to track it myself because I felt like
yeah.
I
It was
wrote
your
it. I
book,
wanted to talk about it, but it was
totally.
You're
Yeah,
right
and
about stomach noises. If you have to record something, eat bland food beforehand.
true
a
story.
green apple.
Yeah,
True
the more
story.
you know.
Yeah, you don't want that stomach churning, man.
No,
Especially
it's
with our
happened to me
mode.
before. I just finished. I was in the middle of a track. I'm like, this is the take. It. That
Yep, it's like, man, it's like in our mics pick everything up, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's
But I'm
yeah,
looking forward to your
I
show. Are you
yeah.
sure you want to commit to daily? That's all I'm saying.
I mean, we're doing it. We're gonna
I
Go
can
do
see
for
you
it.
guys doing
Yeah,
it.
we're gonna do the morning drive. I ordered like we're building the set.
I
It's a
can't
50s
wait.
morning
diner.
drive.
It's gonna
Didn't
be
you
great.
say your daughter's going to be the waitress?
Yes,
I
yeah,
love
it's gonna be
it.
great. Our 17-year-old, not our 11-year-old. So, and our
Oh,
17-year-old is definitely our daughter. So she's got plenty of sass. Like the running gimmick is she's gonna be very, very rude to me and absolute charmer to Alice. It's gonna be the running gag. Like every day I'll be trained to order, it'll be fun.
I heard, Bob, I heard you talking about it with the prosecutors. And what was that place you mentioned where it was known that waiters are rude? Because my sister went to Boston College and I remember that. What was it called?
There were a
Um,
couple. There was Ed
Been-
DeBevick's.
no, not
Ed
And the
that one.
Bevics. I used to go to the one north.
and then Dick's Last Resort.
Yes, Dick's Last Resort.
Yeah,
Yes.
those were the
Where
two
that was
that
the
were
thing. Yes.
yeah, yes. And it's fun, and it's cool. So we're excited about it. I ordered like a corner 50s booth diner, like it's got the red
That's so
vinyl with the
cool.
white V. It's gonna be cool. It's gonna look like a diner. So and we're gonna roll with it. We'll be done. We'll be done before everybody's like ready to roll on with their lives. And
Roller skates. That's the best. First thing in the morning, get it over with.
love it.
We'll be watching.
It'll be great. It'll be great. Well, thank you guys so
Thanks for
much.
coming.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having us. Yeah.
We're sorry to have
Ruined your
made
entire
questions
Friday
hard.
night.
Goodbye.
I don't do much anymore. I haven't in the last 10 years.
Yeah, we don't get out much either unless we're like traveling somewhere. It seems like we're always home. But
Yeah, I'm good. I mean, I told you my social. I'm good. I'm here.
yeah, I mean, like,
Avid endorsement.
I'm basically the same dude, man. So you guys are amazing. Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure. And have me
Thank
on.
you.
Have Allison
Oh,
on.
for sure.
We'd love
Oh,
to
yeah,
come
we
on.
can't wait.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks,
because
everyone.
there's lots of stuff. We don't have to talk about Delphi. There's many, many things we could talk about.
That's true.
There's
That's true.
millions of cases in the naked city.
There are. Yeah.
All right, you guys,
All right,
take
guys.
care.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thanks, everyone, for watching.
Bye.
Of course. All right.
Bye. I don't know how to
I gotcha. Oh, she came back.
All right. Okay, so I want to go through our. I was putting them up. I was
Dude,
throwing them up.
I'm
Nerdy and Eva.
starving.
All right.
It was very difficult, like, because, I was being sort of conscious of the fact, like, because she's doing it or they're doing this, the family might
Definitely.
watch it. So I don't want to come off,
Right. Well,
crass, but
well, I
it's
knew that
horrible
going
for
in
them
that
if they
she's
have the wrong person. But that's why, at least looking at it like, okay, well, let's get the other person then too. If
well,
it's
that's
two,
the thing.
right.
That's exactly the point. That it's like I'm not I'm not upset that they're continuing to say that the investigation is still ongoing
No,
because it
that's
should
good.
be. It
Right.
should be. Whether it's somebody that worked in cahoots with Alan or whether it's an entirely different person.
Right.
Like,
At least
or
they
people,
find
whatever the case may be, they're still digging into it. I think it's important. So, Nerdy and Eva, if you're still here, $4 holla. Appreciate you. Love you all. Hope Hate Fear gifted 1 Defense Diaries membership. I don't know who the lucky recipient of that was, but thank you so much. Hope Hate Fear. Meg P gifted 5 Defense Diaries podcast membership.
Wow.
Generous. Thank you so much, Meg, if you're still here. Jen, wow, they were upping it. It's like it was a one-upping contest. It's like, I'm going to give 1. And then Meg said, I'm going to give 5. And Jen said, I'm going to give 10. Wow. So thank you so much. It's incredibly generous. We're so thankful to you. Dom's mom, $2 holla super sticker. Thank you so much. You want to know what we know?
Well,
And it was a good question.
Yeah, he said it was a good question, but it sounds like what his answer is to it, they're obviously not going to say anything to upset anyone, but is that if there's this other person, then that's who they're looking for. All right, I'm going to have to let you finish this.
Ciao. Here, turn your, I'll remove you. All right. Dino, no, I'm never going to be a Packers fan, dude. Like, it's not happening, bro. But I wish. Like, it's a superior organization. There's no doubting that. It's like I'm cursed. It's my curse to be a Bears fan for the rest of my life and live in misery. But thank you for that $2 holla. Digger Dave, $3 holla. Appreciate you, brother. Thanks for coming out. Another. It will only come out of trial. Please let's get RA a fair and speedy, no chance trial, alive and well. Here to that. Thank you very much. I echo your sentiments there. Absolutely. And thank you for that generosity of the $5 holla. Debbie with the $10 holla. Love it. Thank you so much. Incredibly generous, Debbie. And I see that you're a lovely member. So that means so much. We love our members. And members only stream coming, I think next week is when I want to do the first one of those. Frankie with the €6 coming from, I think Frank's in Norway. He's somewhere Scandinavian. Thank you, Frankie. Thanks for hanging in here. Good factoids too, brother. I saw those during the live, man. Thank you very much for your generosity. Persephone, Applewood, $3 holla. Appreciate it. You got to go. Thanks for hanging with us while you could. Ivy, $10 holla. Ivy push. Appreciate you. Justice for Abby and Libby. Absolutely. Charmaine, you're always just a hero. You're just a hero. Like we were talking about you. I was texting with Mandy and Stevie last night about how much we love you. Thank you so much for your generosity and your constant patronage. It means everything to us. And last but not least, Gail, you're a doll. Thank you so much for that $5 holla. We appreciate you guys. Like your generosity means everything to us. As you know, we try to put, Don Burke with the $20 coming in like hot. Don with the $20 holla. Thank you so much. We appreciate you guys more than you'll ever know. We love this community that we're building with all of our friends out there. And, we've got Jay, we've got Shannon with their shows. I'm assuming that you guys are all sub to those guys. We've got Steve and Dan with Publicly Buzz. We got Joe Jackalone. And they're all fam. And like we're building a great community here. So we really appreciate you guys always hanging with us. And we appreciate, we love the back and forth in the chats. It's always great, and you guys, for the most part, keep it civil, because some of these cases, we're just not going to agree on things and some we will, and it's good to have healthy debate. It spurs on ideas, and it spurs on fruitful conversation, and I love debate. I mean, hence why I went to law school. So, I argued for a living. So, what I wanted to remind you guys to do, the Unraveling's got like a bunch of like serious Delphi people talking about the case tonight. You got Sleuthy, my girl over there, and a couple others. I don't know if Charmaine might even be going over there. I don't know. Like maybe not. I can't remember. There's 5 and it's ladies' night over there. I ran into their stream. Y'all should jump over there and check out what they got going on. And then if you're not going to go there, make sure that you go onto Kick and go to Feral Friday. They're checking out Twin Peaks. They've been watching that series, and Steve and Dan are the truth. So, make sure you're hanging out with those guys. And thank you so much. If there were questions that I get to, I apologize. And to my mods, thank you. I finally remembered to thank you before I signed off. I adore you guys. You guys are my everything. I couldn't do this without you guys handling all the stuff going on in chat and everything behind the scenes. You guys are my heroes. I love you so much. And for members, subscribers, make sure you're subscribing, become a member. It's helping the community grow. I think we crossed 11,600. We're super close to 1,200. Spread the word. We think we have pretty good content. We think Alice and I bring a lot of value to this community. And if you agree, Steve's not feeling well. I wish I could give Steve a hug. I love Steve. But if you like it, spread the word. Let people know that we're here. Let them know that we put out some pretty good content, and that we bring some value. We hope that we do. That's our goal. So, all right, y'all. I love you, because without you guys, I would just be an old man talking about an old case. Talk to you next time.
Hot sun.